Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to this Ordinary Council meeting. I welcome members of the public, those joining us online and all of the councillors who are present in the chamber. Before we begin, on behalf of all present and those watching on the webcast, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting here tonight on Cammeraygal land and acknowledge the traditional owners of that land, the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation. This land was never ceded, and we pay our respects to their ancestors and spirits past and present. We have no request for apologies or a leave of absence, but we do have a request for remote access from Councillor Georgia Lamb. Councillor Berrigy.
Mayor, I'd like to move that Council grant permission for Councillor Lamb to attend remotely for the reasons she has provided.
Seconded by Councillor Spencerley. Put that to the meeting. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, and we welcome you, Councillor Lamb, attending remotely. Are there any disclosures of interest for any of the items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Lapouris.
I have a disclosure non-pecuniary. I hate saying that word. I am going to stay in the meeting and I am going to vote. It's a small.
Which item?
Sorry, 10.11.
Thank you. Are there any other disclosures of interest? No. This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements, and by attending this meeting, you are giving consent to your voice and image being webcast. I must remind everyone present that Council's Code of Meeting Practice applies not only to all councillors, but to members of the public who are present. And this Council is committed to living those meeting principles, and particularly those in relation to respect and orderliness. So there will be many differing opinions tonight, both from members of the public and in the debate, and it's a shared obligation, it's part of democratic societies, that all who participate treat all with respect. I'd also remind councillors, council staff and members of the public that you must ensure that your mobile phones are turned to silent during the meetings of the council, and councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media must leave the chamber to do so. That takes us to the agenda. We move to the confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting held on the 27th of March. Is there a mover? Councillor Berrigy, seconded by Councillor Mutton. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, you're aware that there are a number of items where there are speakers. I propose to move to items by exception, and then we will move to each of the items where there are speakers. Councillor Berrigy.
Madam Mayor, I propose to move the following items on Globo. Item 9.1, item 9.2, (9.3), 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, 10.5, 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, 10.9, 10.12, 10.13, 10.14, 10.16 and 10.17.
Is there a second? We'll exclude. Okay,
I'll exclude
10.9. Councillor Welch, you seconded. 10.16 is also excluded. With those two exceptions, 10.9 and 10.16, Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I put the motion for members of the gallery. That means all of these items, the recommendation in the report will be adopted by council and we're moving them together. I put the item, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us back to the agenda. The first item that was not moved by exception is item 10.9, North Sydney Olympic Pool Redevelopment Project Review and Outcomes. Councillor Beregi.
I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I wish to move the motion.
The motion has been moved in the recommendation. You have an amendment?
I have an amendment.
Okay, if you would move your amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. The amendment I wish to move is that the report prepared by Pricewaterhouse and presented to Council and the General Manager's recent update both be made available to the public. I'll speak to that. Do I have a second?
Is there a seconder? Councillor Gibson. You have the
Speak to
floor.
that. Mayor, there is quite a lot of discussion in the media about the pool. There is not always a consistent story, or my understanding, a version in the media that is aligned with the facts. That said, I think it is appropriate, given the size of this project and given the budget overrun that we are talking about, that our community be as comprehensively briefed as our councillors on the matters relating to the pool. And it seems to me that the most effective way of doing that is not to paraphrase the reports, but to actually make them available to the community for discussion or debate. Sometimes debate can be uncomfortable, but it's best that that debate be carried forward with a fully informed community. So in the nature of transparency, I think this is the most appropriate way forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there, Councillor Gibson, you wish to speak to the amendment?
First of all, can we seek some advice from the General Manager?
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Whether this is a legitimate motion, whether it's legal.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the Council has certainly received legal advice, and for commercial in confidence reasons as well as contractual reasons, there are elements of the report that that shouldn't be released or wouldn't be in the best interest of Council and the community, given the contracts in place and the financial ramifications of release of that information.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Do you wish to speak to the amendment or to...
Look, I will speak. I'll speak to the amendment. I wasn't going to speak to this at all because there's been so much discussion. I haven't got a mic. I wasn't going to speak to this, but seeing as Councillor Mutton's brought it up, I will. Look, I would also welcome this this report to be made public because I think it's a really it's a very interesting report, and I think it justifies the actions of the previous council. And I think there's been a lot of bad-mouthing from some sitting councillors and people...
Again, Councillor Gibson,
Yeah.
I'm going to remind you of your obligations under Clause 15.11 of the Code of Meeting Practice and not to impugn
I'm not impugning
the
anything,
actions
and I'm not-
or intentions of other councillors.
Okay, I'll take up the word other councillors. There's been a lot of misinformation being spread about how the previous council managed the redevelopment of this pool, and that has come up mainly at precinct meetings. I've read minutes from those precinct meetings, and I've I've been disgusted and aghast at what has been said at those meetings. I'd say this review comes at a high financial cost to our ratepayers. So there was a significant amount of money spent doing this review, but it does not deliver the pool $1 cheaper or 1 day earlier. So what was the purpose of it? Are we seriously saying that next time we do a really big project like redevelop the pool, we'll have all the information on how to do it? I don't think so. We won't be doing anything of this scale again for the next 80 years, I would suggest. So there's no lessons to be learnt in that report. I also don't believe that the PwC report fulfilled the council resolution from the 10th of October 2022, which was that council urgently undertake an independent review of the council's management of the North Sydney Pool redevelopment project. And point 2, and this is the part that worries me, the council engage a suitably qualified independent person to undertake a thorough review of all aspects of the North Sydney Pool redevelopment project and prepare a report to council. So number 2 is the one that concerns me, councillors. A thorough review of all aspects of the North Sydney Pool redevelopment. But all the PricewaterhouseCoopers document did was talk about everything that they thought had gone wrong. Where was the information that the construction is proceeding in a really professional way and we are going to be delivered a world-class pool when it's finished? Where was that information, councillors? No information about how well the job's being done. I think that's vital information. I think the community needed to know that. The level of the standard of construction at the pool is absolutely first class. I also would say. So in my opinion, this report actually contains significant flaws and much relevant information has been omitted. If we want to ensure transparency in this council and ensure we communicate information to our residents, we can't leave things out. We can't just select what we want the public to hear about and then conveniently leave the rest out. That is just not acceptable. The report grossly underestimates the effects of COVID and La Nina on both timing and budget. The report limits the impacts to those days the site was entirely closed down, which was 22 days, and then it was closed down 38 days because of flooding. I'm sorry, building sites across New South Wales were closed down and many of them never reopened. And this was, of course, of the effects of the pandemic. It's reasonable to suggest that the effects of the pandemic were limited to those days that the pool was closed because of state regulations, which said building sites must be closed. It has affected every single day of the construction process and continues to do so. So that's disingenuous and simplistic. Of course, the pandemic affected the construction process each and every day. There was disruptions in supply lines, staff absences, the rapid escalation in the cost of steel and other building and other raw products. Communication lines between our builders Icon and our design team were severely compromised during that period. The report also bizarrely suggests that we should have had a better plan in place, a better contingency plan.
Thank you. That's your 5 minutes.
Okay, can I just finish this? I think it's important.
No,
Yes, I
if you
would.
finish your last sentence, we have a long
Okay,
matters
I
on
know
the
that, but
agenda
this is
tonight.
important, Mayor.
You've had your 5 minutes, so finish
Can I
your
please
sentence.
just finish briefly? So the report also bizarrely suggests that we should have in place a better contingency plan, which suggests that other entities out there had plans in place to deal with a a pandemic such as COVID.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. If you'd resume your
Okay,
seat.
okay. Could I
5
just
minutes
say
and
I did have a
conclude.
lot more to say, and I will be forced to publish this in another forum. I think.
That's your right. Would you sit down now? You've had
Well,
your 5
I would
minutes of
request
debate.
a brief extension. I just have three more points.
You've
that I
had a
wanna
brief
say.
extension, and I'd ask you to resume your seat.
Well, I think our community sitting
Who'd
here.
vote for an extension? If you
Yes.
would please stand up.
No,
I
it's
will.
not. And again, I
please.
should have an
don't.
extension.
Let the expert
I am
speak.
calling you to order.
Please.
I have explained to you that the Code of Meeting Practice applies equally to those in the gallery. This isn't a rabble. We have rules of meeting practice, and you will respect them. Would you sit down? Sit down.
I have been gagged once again, Mayor.
Thank you. Would you turn off your microphone? Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Spencerley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to delve into the detail that Councillor Gibson has gone into, but I think it's fair, anyone reading the report, anyone looking at the project, this has not been incredibly well managed by council. We haven't resourced it correctly. I mean, this is just the facts and the reality. It's a large project. I think the summary, that I've seen is that council, surprisingly, I thought maybe it wouldn't be the case, but council is surprisingly, ill adept at managing large building projects. The fact of the matter is the more information we can make public, the better. Ultimately, council is responsible for building this pool. We are responsible for making the policy and creating the policy. I think we're doing the right thing by looking into the conduct of the pool and the process. I don't think we need a slap on the back saying, well done, some of it's been great. That can be assumed. We need to know what's wrong. We need to know how to fix it, and we need to know how to deliver the pool as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And this report allows us to get a better sense of what needs to be done. I would propose an amendment if the original mover is happy that any commercial in confidence or anything that would damage or potentially create an issue for us in a court case be redacted, but the minimum be applied to that principle, and that we release the report. We live and we breathe this pool. The community should as well. Thank you.
Councillor Mutton, are you prepared to take that modification to your amendment on? Okay, so let's be clear what your amendment seeks, that the report prepared by PricewaterhouseCoopers as presented to council be made available to public, subject to the redaction of any commercial in confidence or contractually sensitive. Is that the and/or issues presenting a legal risk to council?
Madam Mayor, I'm prepared to take that on in the motion.
Okay.
So that council also notes the report and provides a copy to the OLG as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the original mover has taken on that amendment to Councillor Mutton's amendment as part of the original motion, which is and Councillor Welsh, you're prepared to take that on. Councillor Burke, you sought to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. My understanding was that the current status of the public information was at that point where we have redacted, for lack of a better word, or not made public the information that would lead us to great risk in the court case at the moment. So I thought we were already at that balance right now. A question through you to the General Manager. Could you advise us if we are already at that position?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that was the aim of the report, was to provide a summary of those areas of the PwC report that were not considered to present financial or legal risk. Should Council wish to proceed with a redacted version of the PwC report based on commercial in confidence and legal risks, then that is a matter for Council.
I'd like to add some things on as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Gibson, we have a motion. Are there any other speakers to?
Well, I want
the
to
motion?
add some other points.
Well,
on,
what are the additional points
Well,
that you
I'll
seek to incorporate?
I would like I would also seek an explanation from PricewaterhouseCoopers why they failed to acknowledge the input from our independent probity advisors, Prevention Partners.
No, I'm going to rule that out of order. Thank you.
Why is that out of order?
Because you are assuming something that is not true. as part of it. So,
So-
that is not
Okay,
true.
well, I'll
and I'm not
reword
going
it.
to. No.
I'll just reword it. I've got some other points here, Mayor. You wouldn't
Well,
let me.
what I
you wouldn't let me
suggest,
speak before.
Councillor Gibson, if you have a foreshadowed motion, which it sounds as if you do, which is
I don't
the
have a
motion that's
foreshadowed
before
motion.
the
I have
council,
some
well,
things to add on to the motion that Councillor Mutton put forward. You wouldn't allow me to speak before, so there is another chance now. The motion has been amended.
Put them succinctly and directly, and I'll rule them either in or out, and we'll ask the movers whether they're prepared to take it on.
Good, that we seek information from Price Waterhouse Cooper why the independent probity advisors report prepared by Prevention Partners wasn't discussed.
Again, this is not helpful. It is not true. The report was an independent review. If you have matters you wish to put, I suggest you put them through the General Manager in another forum.
No, this is where we do business.
Okay, that's the first one. I've ruled that out of order.
All right,
So
well, I'll
your
go
next
to the
one?
next point.
What's your next
Well,
point?
I'll go to the next
Yes.
point. Why PricewaterhouseCooper failed to include discussion on the delays on drawing down the T Corp loan, as advised by the previous General Manager, and what cost that and what was the total cost of that?
Okay, that's your next point. I'll put them and I'll put them to the movers.
All right. Also, I think the report should include.
No, the report is the report.
No, not sure. I think the motion should include the acknowledgement that this elected council. That we acknowledge the tardiness of this elected council.
No,
to
again,
promptly work.
Councillor Gibson, that's an opinion of yours. That is not a lawful motion. Have you any other points?
Well, it is a motion because it is.
I've ruled it out.
You haven't
so
even
you
heard
move
the
to
end of it.
You move to the next one.
I'll reword it. This new council was elected on the 10th of January, yet an independent review wasn't called for nearly a year. That's not good process.
That's debate. So next.
That it should be included. It should be included in the motion. Also, which wasn't included and should be included again. I think the review can be. The review can be amended to include some things that have been missing. The report failed, so also I would like PricewaterhouseCooper to acknowledge the breadth and the length of the community consultation that took place during two separate public and DA
The report deals with community consultation. So this is your response to the PricewaterhouseCoopers report. I'm ruling that out of order again. Now, do you have any other items that you wish to include? Because I will shortly be asking the movers as to whether they wish to take it on. If they don't, then we will regard what you have put forward as a foreshadowed motion.
I think that's all, Mayor. I'll be getting this information out to the community by other means because the community
you've already
have
spoken.
not heard the full
Would
story.
you take your seat?
The
You've already
community
spoken.
have not heard the full story.
Turn off your microphone. You've already spoken. Thank you. Are the movers prepared to take those additional items on?
I thought they were all ruled out of order.
No. There were two that weren't.
What were they?
The two were, one was about about the T Corp loan, and that was it. Right, so are you prepared to take that on?
We already know the answers, so I'm happy to take it on.
Okay, are you happy to take it on as the seconder? Thank you. Is there anyone wish to speak to the motion, which is now before the council? Do you wish to use your right of reply? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I would happily release the whole of the report right now, if we could. It absolutely vindicates everything that I said in the last council with this project. It was handled appallingly.
Point of order, Mayor. Councillor Berry is impugning the previous council.
Well, I'm actually just reading from the project summary. If you don't like it, that's fine. Withdraw.
Councillor Gibson,
Thank you.
I'm ruling against your motion, your point of order.
you.
Thank you.
As a councillor, I was forced to put in over $300 of GIPPers in my own personal capacity to find out what was happening with the pool project.
Point of order,
That is
Mayor.
a fact.
Okay,
Point
well,
of order, Mayor.
Councillor Gibson, what is your point of order?
Mayor. Councillor Berry had put in GIPPers because she didn't come to the briefing.
No, that is,
No
again,
information was
Councillor Gibson, I'm ruling against your point of order. The fact is the fact that she did, and you impugning her motives is, again, I'm calling, Councillor Gibson, I refer you to clause 6.9 of the Code of Meeting Practice. When the chair speaks, all councillors remain silent. That includes you. I've ruled on the point of order, and now I'm also warning you that under clause 15.11 you are impugning the motive of the councillor in putting in the GIPPer. So I'm putting you on notice and calling you to order. Again, Councillor Gibson, I am calling you to order. Thank you, Councillor Berrigan. Resume your. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. At every point in a meeting, I was told to sit down and not to ask questions. And in fact,
Point of order, Mayor. We can't just keep having this total diatribe.
Councillor Gibson, I'm going to rule against you. You were listened to when you had your 5 minutes of debate without interruption, and I would ask that you would do the same for your colleague. Thank you, Councillor Berrigan. Resume the floor.
You have to tell the truth, Mayor.
point of order, I'd just like to say that is an improper use of your behaviour, and I think you should apologise to the Mayor. She is not lying.
Again, I'm drawing to your notice, Councillor Gibson. This will be a very long night. I'm calling to your notice that you treat those around you with respect. If you don't agree with the ruling, you have other opportunities to do within meeting practice. Yes, and I have ruled against it, and I'm not arguing about it. So you will remain silent to allow your colleague to have the floor.
In fact, so restricted from information was I that when I applied to attend a council meeting remotely, the former council ruled against me actually attending the meeting and also ruled against Councillor Baker attending the meeting. The report is very clear. The governance structures did not include an experienced technical advisor to advise on the challenges and mitigation opportunities. Risk management practices were not at a level that could support effective decision-making in a project of this complexity and scale, and some of the risks and mitigations identified were not managed or implemented during the delivery of the project. The business case submissions to Council over the life of the project do not include all financial and non-financial data to provide whole-of-life assessment of all options with clear visibility of the total outturn cost and return on investment. The growth in the project scope from option 2 to option 2B was driven by councillors' desire for a superior facility which did not fully align with the feedback from the community consultation.
The point of order, Mayor, that is just simply
Councillor Gibson, I'm ruling against you. That is a direct quote. Councillor Gibson, it's a direct quote from the report.
Well, make sure
Councillor Gibson, again, clause 6.9. Clause 6.9 requires you to be silent while the chair is speaking. I'd ask you to take some restraint and abide by the Code of Meeting Practice this evening. Thank you, Councillor Berrigan. You may resume.
Thank you, Mayor. A contracting strategy was not undertaken to inform the selection of the appropriate form of contract. In addition, the contract terms used were not familiar to Council. The construction contract negotiation and signing was expedited with an agreement signed on the 31st of December 2020. This expedited award created issues for the project as the design documentation was incomplete and site investigations were ongoing, leading already to early variations and delay. I could go on, but it is in the report. These issues were brought up time and time again by myself, by
Point of
Councillor...
order, that is simply untrue.
Councillor Gibson, Councillor Gibson, I'm ruling against you. That is not untrue. That was absolutely true, and it's minuted by this council. So thank you. I've ruled on your point of order. Councillor Beregi, would you resume the floor?
Thank you. None of the issues brought up in the report are a surprise to me. In fact, they are a relief. I hold my tongue when I say I told you so, but I did. And we tried and tried to call the majority of the former council to at least listen and to hear what we had to say, which was only in the best interests of North Sydney and the ratepayers. I'm very grateful to this new council for taking on a review and for understanding where the pool is at. The forecast budget was never going to meet the scope of the design. That was very evident from very early on. Nor was a pool ever going to be delivered by November 2022, that is last year. It was always destined, in my opinion, to fail, and fail it has, in my opinion.
So, Councillor Gibson, I'm ruling against your point of order. It is quite proper that a councillor can express an opinion, which is exactly what Councillor Beregi just did. She did not impugn anybody else. She talked about her opinion on the matter, and I'm ruling against you on the point of order. Again, I'm going to remind you about your obligations, your shared obligations with the rest of us, to abide by this code of meeting practice. Continue, please, Ms Beregi.
Thank you, Mayor. Finally, it pains me to see how much money this pool is going to cost. Whilst the pool is an asset, it is not one that we can sell. It's not one that it is a community service that we are providing. If pools made money, everybody would run a pool, but they don't. It is a wonderful community asset, but it is not one that you can just tip endless amounts of money into and then expect a return. It's not how it works. The business cases that were provided were completely inadequate for the decisions being made. Further, the new facilities for the cafe and the restaurant didn't even go out to tender. They've been secured by the same operator who has held them for 20 years with absolutely no idea of what a market price would be for two of the most iconic places in the whole of Sydney for cafe and restaurant facilities. That alone is a damning indictment of the way that this pool project was run. We will, however, deliver a pool, and it will be wonderful. The sad part is that it should have been delivered by now. It should have been delivered on budget, and it should have been delivered on time. And unfortunately, these are very heavy lessons for everyone to have to swallow. Me particularly, given that I had raised every issue. If I could release that report, I would release it and provide you all with a copy. But it is not in the interests of the council to do so at this point in time. But it will be released, and it will be released in full the day that the day that we can. I commend the motion.
Thank you. I put the item. All those in favour? That's carried.
Sorry, someone's voted against it.
Well, it's carried. I didn't say unanimously. Councillor Gibson against. Thank you. That takes us to the next item, item 10.10, the parking draft DCP amendments and post-exhibition report. I'd call for a motion to open the public forum in relation to this item. Councillor Beregi, seconded by Councillor Spencerley. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. There are 13 registered speakers, one of whom is attending remotely. I'll call the first speaker. This evening, as we have so many speakers, we are reducing the time for speakers to 2 minutes. And I'd ask the gallery that whether you agree with the speaker or not, that you show respect and do not engage in disorderly behaviour. If it happens, I will call you to order. The first speaker is Nathan Smith. If you would please come forward to the chair at the centre of the table. please give your name, your address, or who you are addressing the council on behalf of.
I can. My name's Nathan Smith, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Body by Brando Gym, which is located at 20 Berry Street in North Sydney, which I have a vested interest. Okay, our business and many others within the precinct already face significant challenges with parking availability for our customers. The vast majority of our members, over 90%, reside in areas outside of the North Sydney precinct and travel via car to train at the gym. We're obviously therefore heavily reliant on localised on-street parking. That parking is already very limited. By way of example, parking along nearby Angelo Street is almost exclusively utilised by residents and visitors to the Lucient residential tower on the Pacific Highway that clearly do not have the allotted parking spaces within their premises. The DCP amendment that has been proposed would only further amplify these issues by reducing permissible car park numbers and forcing car owners to seek on-street parking options. To my mind, this is a directly relevant example which demonstrates that parking restrictions of this nature does not reduce car ownerships, rather simply serves to push cars into on-street parking. We've already lost a number of members due to the availability of parking, and this issue will ultimately affect the ongoing viability of the business and our appetite to continue doing business within the North Sydney precinct. And I think this will no doubt be reflective of many other businesses within the area. It's extremely disappointing to see the lack of community consultation on such a significant matter that it will affect so many. It is clear that the consultation process has been grossly inadequate and alarmingly not even in accordance with the council's own policies. There has been no consultation with our business whatsoever. I really struggle to understand how council could think it's acceptable to simply ignore community feedback on this issue and arrogantly progress the matter to a vote here this evening.
Thank you. That's your 2 minutes. If you just finish your
Yep, sure.
thought.
We live in a democracy, not a dictatorship. I implore you to listen to your constituents and vote to reject the amendment that has been put to you forward this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Just before you leave the chair, are there any questions of the speaker? No, no, I'm sorry. This is of the councillors. Again, I'm going to remind you that the Code of Meeting Practice applies and call you to order. Thank you very much for your participation. The next registered speaker is Kira Donoso, or Kira Donoso. Could say your name, your address, and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Correctly pronounced it initially. My name is Kira Donoso. I am a local resident of North Sydney local government area, but I also would like to just disclose for full transparency that I am an employee of Cbus Property, but I am here as a disgruntled purchaser. So I'm here to express my opposition to the proposed DCP changes. As a long-term resident, I know that parking has been a major issue in the area, and this is even identified in your own in Council's own transport strategy report in 2017. I myself am a young professional who owns a car but works in the city, and like many of my neighbours, my daily commutes rely predominantly on public transport. However, public transport in and around Sydney is not sufficient enough to provide for ad hoc trips and is why we still own vehicles. Car ownership, therefore, does not directly equate to increased traffic generation as implied by council. And I emphasise implied because council have not done the investigatory work to confirm their justification. I understand the council's desire to reduce car dependency, but I don't believe these changes are the right solution. They have been recommended without proper process or community input. Has the needs of, say, families, the elderly and disabled who rely on cars been considered? No. Further, I urge the council to consider the social impact these changes would have, as they may also introduce different types of development in the area, including investor stock and affordable housing. The community does not want to see this. Moreover, reducing parking rates and abolishing visitor parking may result in additional demand for already limited on-street parking. I have seen this happen in areas I've lived within North Sydney. What happens? Me and my visitors having to park 500 metres plus away from my residence. How is that acceptable? Why are you putting the onus back on me and the people of North Sydney for the decisions you're making on car parking? Councillors, you have been given this platform to act on behalf of the community. And the majority of the community are saying no to these changes. So I urge you to represent us correctly tonight, please, and demand that council follows a more thorough consultation process and gathers factual information before making any planning amendments that could severely impact the area and its people. That was all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? No. Thank you for your participation. The next registered speaker is Andrew Duggan. If you would come forward, please. And again, if you give your name, your address and who you're addressing council on behalf of.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Andrew Duggan. I'm a consultant town planner and director at Ethos Urban with over 20 years' experience. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of my clients Cbus Property, Galileo Group and Platform Project Services. Last week, we sent a briefing to all councillors which outlines the reasons why this council should not adopt the recommendation before it tonight. Our briefing went into more detail than I'm able to speak to tonight. However, tonight I would like to provide council with my direct experience between 2010 and 2012 with the transition to reduced parking rates in the City of Sydney as an example about how this should be done. In 2010, the City of Sydney set about undertaking a significant parking strategy to embed it within its planning controls. Not only was this a whole of government area project, unlike what is proposed tonight, but it also meant providing common parking rates across the LGA from areas that were previously amalgamated into the City of Sydney some 6 years earlier. The parking rates that were developed represented a 50% reduction in some accessible parts of the city, such as the CBD, and less in others. However, as a practitioner that worked extensively in the city in that period, I can say there was far greater acceptance by the housing industry and community than what I see represented in the officer's report tonight. The reasons for this are threefold. Firstly, the parking rates that were adopted were a comprehensive LGA-wide approach to parking, which dealt with all types of housing in all areas. Secondly, sufficient time, almost 2 years, and meaningful consultation occurred, which allowed for people to prepare and transition across to the new rates. And thirdly, appropriate savings provisions were adopted, which allowed for investment certainty and an orderly transition by the housing industry to the new rates. We strongly recommend that councillors reject the DCP amendments as presented in the report tonight. We recommend that council pursue alternate means to restrict car parking rates for the planning proposals under consideration, which is the key driver for the proposed DCP amendments. Site-specific DCP provisions could be easily embedded for these sites rather than introducing controls that affect the broader LGA. We also recommend that council wait until the LGA-wide parking strategy already mooted by council officers is completed.
That's your 2 minutes.
That's
if you'd like to finish.
However, if council is not minded to do this, then at a minimum we recommend council introduce savings and transitional provisions in the North Sydney DCP that allows for any DAs lodged but not determined to be assessed under the existing planning controls. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Thank you for your participation. The next speaker is Emma Glavin. Thank you again. If you could say your name and address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Yes, thank you. My name is Emma Glavin and I'm a resident of Cremorne. I've lived in 3 different apartments in the North Sydney LGA since 2010, and in that time I've contributed to 3 different demographic groups: single person household, a double income no kids household and a 4-person household. In the first 2 scenarios, I lived in an apartment without a car in an area of high accessibility. I worked at various locations in a 20-kilometre radius from home, and I never felt the need to own a car. I now live in a 4-person household and I'm the mother of 2 children under 5. I'm the primary carer and I also work full-time. I live in a 3-bedroom apartment with 1 allocated car space. We have 1 car that assists us to do the following daily: separate daycare and preschool drop-offs and pickups, both of which are a 20-minute walk in opposite directions from home and our workplaces, but still within our suburb. Commute to and from work in the inner west, pick up groceries and other items like everyone else has to do, and take kids to and from activities. Having lived without a car for so long, I know both sides of the argument, but I can say with absolute conviction that I could not survive without a car now that I have a young family. Anyone who has young children can vouch for the logistics of racing from a meeting to pick up before they close at 6 p.m, knowing that you only have a 1-hour window to tackle dinner, bath and bedtime before all hell breaks loose. Let alone the logistics of trying to cut groceries, school bags, prams on public transport after a long day, with children who are too tired to lift their feet. Throw in some torrential rain and you've got a minor disaster on your hands. This experience allows me to say that the proposed DCP amendment will severely disadvantage people like me, an entire demographic group of working parents. According to the 2020 census, the average person in the North Sydney LGA is female, 38 years old, married and a full-time worker. According to these statistics, I am the average North Sydney LGA resident. Whilst I am not directly impacted by this change, I beg the councillors present here tonight to vote against it. There has been insufficient demographic research as to the impact of the proposed parking amendments. If this proposed amendment is passed, it will demonstrate clear discrimination by North Sydney Council against young families.
Thank you.
And
That's
to
your
an
2
even
minutes.
greater degree, it will discriminate against women like me, who are the primary carer. North Sydney Council must do better.
Thank you.
Can I ask a
Again,
question?
yes, direct, succinct and without argument.
Yes. So do you suggest if this is passed tonight, that we would have young families such as yours being forced to move out of the area?
Absolutely. If I was directly impacted by it, we'd have to move. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hold before you leave, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for those comments, Ms Glaven. So can I get this correct? You live in a 3-bedroom apartment and you have one motor vehicle
Yes.
and it has one car space, is that correct?
Yes.
My understanding is that that is the...
I'd have to say
Okay,
to you,
thank
Councillor
you.
Burke, that without argument. So thank you. You've had your question. Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you for that, and well put and eloquent. You're not a property developer, you don't have any vested interests, you're here, it doesn't affect you because you already have a parking spot. Just what motivates you to come tonight? Why are you making this?
Because I heard about it and there's been no community consultation, certainly not in my area in Cremorne. Maybe it's because we're not directly impacted, but I feel really strongly about it. It's something that would, you know, if we were living in the area, would enormously impact our lives. And if people in the area don't know about it, particularly working parents who don't necessarily pick up pamphlets or read whatever the consultation has been, not necessarily trawling North Sydney Council on social media, and they don't have a voice and no one's been able to speak for them. So yeah, I feel really, really strongly about it. And like I said, I lived without a car for, didn't own a car for the first 30 years of my life. Obviously I couldn't drive for all those 30 years, but yeah, didn't own a car, didn't feel the need to own a car. And I do believe in reduced car ownership, but it will enormously impact the key demographic of North Sydney, which is young families and young women particularly, I believe too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Andrew Morse. If you would come forward. And again, if you would give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors. My name is Andrew Morse. I'm a traffic engineer and the Managing Director of PTC, just located across in 1 James Place, across the park there, so I know this area very well as a tenant of council. Tonight I'm speaking to you on behalf of Cbus and Galileo regarding their development at East Walker Street, but also generally about the approach to parking policy. I sent a briefing note which outlines my opinions in more detail about the DCP changes, but here are some key points for this evening. The report before Council states that the reason for reducing the parking rates is ultimately to reduce traffic congestion in North Sydney. But the report does not define the underlying source of congestion or define the reduction resulting from these proposed rate changes. It jumps to a conclusion and then seeks to justify that conclusion. The report does not provide any evidence supporting the proposed changes in that there is no North Sydney-based data demonstrating that a reduction in residential parking rates will have any effect on local traffic conditions. At the centre of the report is the claim that there is a correlation between on-site residential parking and traffic activity, but fails to clearly demonstrate this in the context of North Sydney. The report refers to, quote, abundant analysis, end quotes, but showing the relationship, but relies on only 3 studies dating from the 90s in the US and one from Australia that's over 10 years old, of broad metropolitan areas. The only Sydney-based report cuts out the Sydney LGA and surrounding areas because it would skew the results. There's no abundant analysis. It's a very difficult link to prove one way or the other, and the reference to the Transport for New South Wales Guide is incorrect. This document makes no such claim. The study confirms that there are many other factors in residents' decisions whether to drive or not, and the previous speaker spoke to some of those, and those studies found exactly those types of demographic impacts that these rate changes would have. We undertook our own study, albeit very small in the time that we had, of buildings within North Sydney, and we could find no meaningful correlation between car ownership and the trips derived from those buildings.
That's your 2 minutes, if you would.
We've just got one sentence, if I can. We believe that the report uses the perception that more car ownership equals more trips, rather than just supporting this claim with technical studies. What you require as a council to make this decision are the 5 studies that underpin the 2017 transport strategy. For example, the walking action plan, the integrated cycle plan. You need those documents in order to make the decision. To put this ahead of those is very problematic.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Thank you for your participation. Next speaker is David Milton.
Thank you.
And if you could give your name, your address, and who you're speaking on behalf of.
I'm David Milton. I live at 1 Premier Street, North Sydney. I've had a business in North Sydney Council for over 20 years. I'm a real estate agent. I'll say I'm biased as a result of the experience I've had with buyers. I sell a lot of apartments off the plan, but I'm here as a resident with my buyers. But there's probably a couple of things I'd like to ask people. First of all, from what I understand, your councillors, you've had over 350 submissions, and about 80%, or I think nearly 82%, are opposed to this amendment or this change in planning, and it seems no one's listening. And then you hear these people ask about or sort of present things, it's like it's noted, but it's not noted. So really, how much research has gone into the planning and the consideration you're giving us? And I'd say whether you're Labor, Liberal or Independent, I don't care. But you all came and asked, get my vote on the basis you'll consider the residents' opinion. And the residents, are 82% of them, not in this room, but globally or within your constituent, have said, we are opposed. Now, the other thing I'd like to move it to, one personal issue, similar to that. My sister has 4 children, 1 car. If she was denied that, she would not be able to work. She delivers meals. She cooks at homes and runs a business. There are so many people. We've had the COVID situation where everyone's worked from home and changed, and we're no longer paying. We haven't paid enough attention to it, how people live. People need cars. If you've got kids taking them to the sport, you can't take them on a train or a bus. You need to be able to drive them. The other thing I'm going to say is, what is your legacy going to be? I live in North Sydney. I want to live in this environment where people come as a community and enjoy it, and the quality of property is first class. And I'll tell you what you're going to do by... I'm not finished yet, I'm sorry. By actually dismissing parking or reducing parking, you're going to create potential student accommodation where it's geared to one community and not the community you're wanting to engage with. And you need to think about it, because the future is these buildings built that are of a cheaper quality because they meet a certain market or demographic, as opposed to what the market is.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Direct, succinct and without argument.
So are you asking all councillors here tonight to vote no to this?
I'm asking councillors to vote no. This is bad policy, and the repercussions will be felt next year, 10 years later, and in 20 years, and we'll look at this council and go, why did you make this decision? Yes, fully.
Thank you for your participation. The next speaker, I'll call you to order, please. The next speaker is Mantas Zagaris Kalida. Again, if I ask that you say your name and address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Hi everyone, my name is Mantas Zagaris Kalida. I'm an owner-occupier of 5 years at 16 Hampton Street, and I'm speaking primarily on behalf of myself, but also as the chairman of the Strata Committee. We've also had these discussions, and most of my neighbours are largely opposed as well to it, but I'll speak from myself. I'd like to second a lot of the reasons, or most of the reasons that the previous people that come up here have said, so I will list some other reasons that I think have not been brought up, just not to waste everybody else's time. I think reflecting back on this change and reflecting back as to why I moved here to North Sydney and my time here. I absolutely love it. I love living in North Sydney. I love living in the precinct with Crow's Nest and St Leonard's, and I hope to keep living here. I have no intention of moving. However, one of the things that I consider now, if I had the choice before I invested in property here and moved with myself and my wife here to participate in the community, if there was no visitor car spaces, or if I did not have an opportunity to have at least one car spot, I would not have moved. It is not possible for me, and I believe for a lot of residents, to live without access to vehicles or for people to come visit. Whether you're elderly or whether you're younger, maybe in certain parts of your life you can go without it, but I feel like for the most part of your life, we are dependent, especially in Australia, which is very, very vast and broad. The other two things I'd just like to quickly highlight is also the illogical and inconsistencies in the reasons proposed for why it should go ahead. So firstly, the previous studies are quite old and they do not incorporate the impact of COVID. I think hybrid working conditions and everything that has happened has greatly changed. So I think the assumptions baked into it to say that this will reduce, or the assumptions of how heavy the congestion will be in the future, need to be revised or revisited completely, as I think the world has changed significantly. And also the other thing is comparing the parking regulations to Sydney City is completely illogical. Sydney is the largest metropolitan, it cannot be matched by anything, and saying we should do the same as Sydney City, well that means we should start building 50-storey towers everywhere, and well maybe then it makes sense. But at the moment that is not the case, so I wish you to oppose, I oppose this, and I wish you to vote no, and if you want to revisit and create new studies to reflect better.
Thank you. That's your 2 minutes. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Councillor Gibson, could you turn off your light? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. David McDonald. Again, if you name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but I do, as you councillors have had shared with you, notes that I've kept from precinct meetings. And I have an answer to a couple of the previous speakers. The data I have here on 9 major arteries into North Sydney show that since 2006, generally the traffic volumes and the traffic volumes and the rate of that has been falling. Okay, I've got it here. Some of you have already had this time again before. I think, councillors, this meeting should not be here. It should be across the corridor there in a public forum where people can come and express themselves to you and participate in a full discussion. The limitation of 2 minutes is very unfortunate. The claim that this will reduce traffic through North Sydney is not so. Residents of North Sydney who own motor vehicles, over 75% of them, will in fact use active transport, i.e. walking and buses and cycles, to get to work if they work in the CBD. But here's the thing, not everybody does work in the CBD. You've heard from a mum back here, right? I've got here listed 15 reasons which you have seen why people need motor vehicles. To say that the public transport is adequate is utter rubbish. Sundays, it's almost nil. Saturday afternoons, it's starting to be diminished. And not only that, we have the metro coming. So if you want to use the argument that there's vast amounts of traffic, that's going to be diminished further. People are entitled, as you've been told, to have a vehicle. It's a democracy. Let them decide. And if they don't want to have a vehicle, they can use the space for cages to store things in, or where there's a shortage, rent them out to people that need them.
That's your
okay,
2 minutes.
that's it. I'm done.
What are you asking councillors to do tonight, Mr. McDonald?
Oh, that's a slip up by me. Vote against it. Listen to your constituents and consultation. Not that it was very good by the RMS over the 2 tunnels, but you need to be out there and listen to people.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation. William Nemesh. Thank you again. If you give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Madam Mayor and councillors, I'm William Nemesh. I'm representing 5X, a landowner and manager of several commercial properties within the North Sydney local government area. So far there's been much discussion surrounding this item, and I don't want to reiterate the comments of other speakers, other than to say that they are eminently reasonable and very considered. But instead, I'd like to raise an objection to the inclusion of the Alfred Street precinct and submit that the precinct should be removed from consideration as a high accessibility area for the following reasons. The first being a planning proposal that includes a draft DCP to amend planning controls, including parking for properties located at the Alfred Street precinct, is ongoing. Given the current proposal was lodged in 2019, long before changes to parking rates were contemplated, it is unfair to be changing the goalposts just before full time. Secondly, the precinct is physically isolated from the North Sydney CBD. The council report from the 25th of July 2020 meeting, 8.6 draft DCP amendment, states, and I quote, "The location of parking should be the determinant of different approaches rather than the definition of each type of housing." Given that council acknowledges that the one size does not fit all when considering parking accessibility, it is curious that the precinct be classified as highly accessible. In council's own Alfred Street precinct planning study of 2019, it explicitly acknowledges that the precinct has a number of challenges which contribute to a negative pedestrian amenity, ultimately inhibiting movement between North Sydney CBD, the precinct and Anderson Park. The planning study lists in detail what these challenges are, including fragmented pedestrian islands, lack of protection from natural elements, and narrow footpath widths and steep stairs and laneways in and around the precinct. Given, can I, one more sentence? Thank you.
Finish.
I just also wanted to state as well that the impacts would also be quite significant in the Whaling Road conservation area in which the precinct is located. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you again for your participation. The next speaker is Julie Hilder. If you would come forward. And again, if you could give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Madam Mayor and councillors, I'm speaking on 10.10 parking draft DCP. My name is Julie Hilder and I have lived and worked in North Sydney since 1993 and have a real estate business that I conduct in the council area, dealing with both commercial, retail as well as residential property. Given the 30 years I've been in the area, I'm well connected with residents and business community and in part speak for them. Council's attempting to reduce car parking rates is an ill-considered and rushed fashion. With over 80% of submissions against his recommendation, I feel that council has not listened to our concerns and taken this overwhelming number of objections seriously. I'm speaking against the recommendation tonight and urge council to defer this report and conduct a more holistic review of parking, including on-street, off-street and parking station parking, as well as the resident parking scheme. I object to the proposed changes as it will create more traffic congestion, not less. The report is flawed based on the principle that every car space in a private development will increase trips on our local roads and does not account for congestion mainly being influenced by journeys to work. Reducing car spaces will not address this, as many car space users need a place to store their car and catch public transport to work, but instead what council is proposing will create an overflow issue to neighbouring areas such as Whaling Road Conservation Precinct. I urge council to remove the Alfred Street Precinct from inclusion within this report. The council should consider an overall plan in which housing and employment are densely concentrated around mass transit nodes, and critical to this is the removal of disincentives for people to live in such centres. Sydney is suffering one of the most severe cost of living and housing affordability crises, and with 1010, council is intent on decreasing housing supply in areas of high transport.
Thank you. That's your 2 minutes if you finish.
Okay. The result, no one will build when they can't provide adequate parking. I'm all for reduction in vehicles on the road, but removing car spaces for new developments is not the answer.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ian Cady. Again, if you would give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Ian Cady. I'm a town planning consultant and director of Mecone. I'm speaking on behalf of Ben Mill, the owner of various properties in North Sydney. My concern is largely with the strategic premise of the draft DCP, which is based on the principle that, and I'm quoting, every car parking space provided in a private development generates multiple corresponding trips on our local roads. While true, this does not acknowledge that not all car spaces are equivalent. A suburban car space generates significantly more trips and more vehicle kilometres travelled than does a car space within a development with immediate proximity to mass transport. Secondly, that congestion is primarily about journey to work, as a number of people have said, and that congestion typically occurs in the morning and evening peaks. The car spaces within a centre such as North Sydney are much more likely to be used for other trips than journey to work, such as visiting friends and family outside, public transport access, going to sport and cultural events, and for people with impaired mobility, and not necessarily disabled, but elderly people who find it more difficult to walk or have young children, etc. For example, the draft DCP only allows 0.7 car spaces per 3-bedroom unit. Now, with the units that would typically sell for several $1 million, purchasers are going to expect to be able to have a car space, not necessarily to be able to drive it to work, but to have that car space. Not allowing that to occur is more likely just to undermine the feasibility of schemes where the actual best way to reduce traffic is to encourage transit-oriented development. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but the denial of parking will actually undermine the form of development that actually addresses traffic congestion. I think, I'll try and finish up now. I think adopting rates lower than central Sydney and, for example, 3-bedroom 0.7 spaces to 1 space in central Sydney is taking the principle of restricting supply way beyond what is reasonable and way beyond what the market can sustain.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation. We now have, Councillor Lepouris.
Do you think restricting supply will also cause more housing, issues with housing affordability in our LGA and so forth and so forth?
Yes, I think most significantly though, it will just prevent the supply of housing, that projects will not be feasible, and so the transit-oriented housing that is the best way of addressing congestion will actually be undermined.
And for your participation. We now have Benjamin Craig, who is joining us online. Could you give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of?
Well, good evening, councillors. Yes, my name's Ben Craig. I'm a town planner and director at Ethos Urban, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the owner of 52 Alfred Street at Milsons Point, otherwise known as the Kimberley Clark Building. Sorry, I can't be with you there tonight, but I'm actually ferrying my kids around with my motor vehicle to AFL and soccer practice this afternoon. Since the council meeting in August 2022, the proposed draft DCP amendment was placed on public exhibition. It received 350 odd submissions in response, of which 288 or 82% of those opposed the proposed amendment, clearly illustrating that there's an overwhelming number of residents and stakeholders that think the proposal is not a good idea. The facts are as follows. The reducing on-site parking for this area is going to do very little to solve local road congestion issues. I haven't seen any tangible evidence that demonstrates that the proposed reduction in parking will have a positive impact on local traffic congestion. It will, however, increase competition for on-street parking and result in residents and visitors spending more time congesting the local roads as they search for a place to park on the street. Now, while St Leonard's, Crow's Nest, North Sydney, Milsons Point have good levels of public transport, they don't service everyone's needs. And not everyone who works on a city line or a rail line that goes into CBD or heads out north, and the large majority of people still need to go elsewhere for their place of employment. So private vehicles are still an essential part for the large majority of households. People still need to do their weekly grocery shop. Families still need to take their children to sport, drop their kids off at school or daycare. And elderly people often need a car to get to medical appointments. All of these trips couldn't be done via public transport, or very, very few of them. Residents and developments get visitors as well, and they need a place to park. And therefore, having a zero visitor parking space policy simply doesn't work. Traffic congestion will get worse, as I mentioned, if we don't have enough on-site parking or visitor parking, all of which will translate into more people spending time on your local streets, congesting the road network.
Thank you. That's
The combination of these.
If you would.
I'll wrap up now. The combination of the lower parking rates and not extended resident parking permit scheme will essentially create a two-class system in these areas, one in which longer-term residents enjoy more parking provisions as well as resident parking permits, while newer residents will effectively be viewed by council as lower-class citizens that are not allowed on-site parking and not entitled to a parking permit. And ultimately, I'd like to request, and that my client would like to request, that the council don't support those amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the Speaker? Thank you for your participation. The final speaker is David Brown. If you come forward, and again, if you give your name, address and who you speak on behalf of.
David Brown at 8 Hampton Street, North Sydney. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a local resident, but also on behalf of the neighbours that I've talked with about this issue. First, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to speak here. I really appreciate that. My sort of prize on this, I conduct research in environmental, social and economic sustainability, so I think quite carefully about the trade-offs that occur in social contexts. I also have a family, and I've lived in North Sydney for 14 years and raised my family in North Sydney. The central issue I see as being a problem with this proposal is that it reduces diversity in the area, and in particular, families. I'd like to speak to 3 issues as it relates to families. The first one is, while it's true the corridor in and out of North Sydney is fantastic, which is one of the reasons we moved here, because I work in the city at Haymarket, it's when you get beyond the immediate moving in and out of North Sydney, it becomes a problem. We just don't sit in a broader transport network, and any of you who have, like I have, lived in London or Paris or any other big cities that have got integrated transport networks will understand what I mean and the usability of the network. The second problem is that it reduces flexibility. It means that if you want to undertake, taking your children to sport of an evening or a weekend or other activity, there are real challenges associated with that, and the transaction and time cost is enormous. And the third thing, it reduces diversity in the context of family and friends being able to move in and out and visit the area, and that changes the community nature of the local area. I guess we've spoken about young families and the challenges of young families that have lived that, but also when you have teenagers or young adults as children who want a motor vehicle, then our capacity to live in the local area and not be able to provide them with that means that we simply have to move. So I guess my final point would be, all the research shows is that individual firms or organisations cannot change broad social trends with their own innovation. You need mass innovation to do that. I think it's an innovative proposal, but unfortunately it doesn't sit in a broader social context that would actually enable it to work functionally.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr Brown. You say that we don't sit in an integrated transport network in North Sydney. What do you see as missing in terms of a transport network?
So, well, the first thing is...
Again, excuse me, if you just hold. I'm going to call you to order, and I'm going to remind you that shortly we will be beginning the debate, and if you continue to interrupt and interject, I will have to call you to order and ask you to vacate the chamber. So I'd ask that everyone allow respect. This is a formal council meeting, and the time for that sort of behaviour is elsewhere. Thank you, Mr Brown, if you'd answer your question.
Thanks for the question. It's a really good question. So what I mean by that is that you can get in and out of North Sydney really easily. It's fantastic. You get into the city and so on, maybe up, Chatswood and so on. And so that corridor, for example, that was spoken about in the transport, the broader integrated transport network sort of plan for North Sydney, that works very well. But once you get beyond that point, accessing other parts of the city is highly problematic because you don't have appropriate connections. So say, for example, when if you live in Paris and you jump on the metro, you can get in and out of your local area on the metro, but then there are quick connections to everywhere else in the city. Now, what that looks like practically is, for example, my wife is a school teacher. Her capacity to be able to get to work and back is virtually impossible with the current transport network in Sydney. And so, we need a motor car. That's just the fact of the matter. And other families like ours will ostensibly be discriminated against because we won't be able to conduct a life like that in Sydney, and you actually lose that in your local school. You don't have that diversity in your local community when you remove those opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, do you have a question?
A quick question. So you see families with children still living at home will be the most affected by this DCP change if it goes through tonight? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wouldn't prioritise them, but I see them as being one of the stakeholder groups that will be, it'll be highly problematic for them. Whether you have young children, and we heard such a beautiful example earlier of a mother who deals with the issues of young children, and my wife and I have lived through that, but also when your children get older, you have different kinds of challenges when you don't live in an adequate transport environment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation.
May I have a motion?
Yes, Councillor Gibson.
My motion is, so number 1 from the recommendation, that council note the submissions made to the public exhibition of the draft amendments to North Sydney Development Control Plan 2013 forming attachment 1 of this report. So we keep 1. Point 2, that council take no further action on the proposed DCP changes. Point 3, that council proceed with an LGA-wide traffic and parking study. And point 4 will read as point 4 reads here, that all submitters be notified of council's decision and thanked for their submissions. That's my motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Lapouris, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, look, Mayor, I don't think we have to say very much. It's not what I have to say, it's what our residents have to say. They've come here tonight, they have spoken loud and clear. I've been on this council for 24 years now, and I'd say this is one of the most interesting sessions that I've had when it comes to feedback from the community. Everyone was extremely succinct and very practical. We heard from residents, not just from developers. So I think the feedback from our community cannot be ignored. If we ignore this tonight and go ahead with the original motion, we may as well just throw our community consultation process out the window. We've consulted our community, and my figure was 84%. 84% say no. We've been elected to listen to our community. The community have come along here. They're not at home having dinner, watching the 7:30 report and, relaxing with their families. They're coming along, sitting here, telling us what they want us to do. I've heard loud and clear, and I would hope that all other councillors would support the motion that I put to this meeting tonight, which is in support of the view of all the residents here.
Councillor Lapouris.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to speak to my fellow councillors about this. I have my doubts about this original motion and the recommendation. I'm supporting Councillor Gibson's motion. I just wanted to say, first of all, just like Councillor Gibson said, I think there's an overwhelmingly large amount of people. It's pretty clear that no one wants this to go ahead, and I think we should take that into consideration, obviously. But what I wanted to talk about was I want to talk a little bit about how most of the people that came up and spoke today kind of touched on this subject, but maybe I can put it into terms that are more clear. There is a notion that was in our report that speaks to that fact that less on-site parking spaces equals less car ownership, and therefore more public transport use, ultimately leading to less congestion and less traffic. Now, there's an article that's cited in our report by Matthew McKibbins that is called upon to support that notion. In that article, the article actually defines that the largest issue is destination accessibility. It's basically what Mr. Brown was talking about. Sydney has terrible destination accessibility. Our public transport is not good enough. I've lived in Paris and in London. I've been to Tokyo. I've been to places that have exceptional public transport, and you can get anywhere at any time. Unfortunately, Sydney doesn't have that. I wish we did, but we don't. And therefore, I don't think this is a great idea. Also, I do worry about housing affordability. I think that most of the people in my generation can't afford houses in our LGA anymore. They've been priced out. They can afford maybe to buy apartments, but if they don't have a parking space in the apartment, then they won't bother. All these apartments will become so expensive that they'll be priced out of that as well. So that's just my opinion on it, and thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm probably a bit out of step. I can see a future where car ownership will be rare. I can see a future when we will all be using shared vehicles. I can see a future when there will be much better intra-LGA transport. But I don't live in that future today. I live in a future where I have to deal with the transport issues we've got. And before we talk about reducing the amount of parking for new developments, we should surely look at some of the troubling issues for our local government area. We should look at how we allocate one of our most valuable resources, curbside parking. We should look at how we make curbside parking available to the people servicing our community, be they people providing health services, or be they people delivering. But we haven't. We should also look at how we allocate parking permits. We should also sit back and say, we live in an environment where the state government is actually penalising developers who put in spaces for visitor car parking. This is just not right. What is missing from our community, what is missing right across Sydney, is something that's happened to us since the 60s, where people travel from one end of Sydney to the other to go to school, where people travel from one end of Sydney to the other to go to work, where people travel from one side of Sydney to the other to see their parents and to see their children. We do not have the transport system to allow them to easily do that by public transport. This is a motion for the future. But before we get to that future, we actually need to sort out the visitor parking thing. We actually need to work out how we're going to cater for people who need to travel to North Sydney. We need to work out how we're going to cater for people who need to travel from North Sydney, be it to educate their kids, be it to go to work. We don't just overnight say all new residents in particular areas are going to have to live without cars. That's insane. And we as a council, we represent our community. We represent the people in this room. So as councillors, it is not for us to impose, or indeed for me, to impose my vision of the future on my supporters, on the people who vote for me. It is for me to listen to the people in our community and hear what they have to say. And I have listened. We've had extensive community consultation. 83% of the community who've responded are opposed to it. I have a newsletter. I have never had as many letters come to me saying, why are you doing this? It will make our lives difficult. So here I am, as a councillor, looking at what I think is what the future holds. But it's not for me to impose that future. It's for the people in this room. It's for the people out in the street, the people who vote, to actually tell me that's what they want. And you know, I haven't heard a whisper from people saying, let's cut back the parking in North Sydney. Not a ripple of a word. And what I find even more galling about this is that we're going to cherry pick our local government area. So we're going to punish some areas, saying you can't have a car. But on other areas, we're going to say, have what you want. No. Our community is saying with great clarity, we want the current system to continue. And our community deserves to be heard.
Thank you. That's your 5 minutes. If you could.
I will strive for people to join me with that vision, but I sure as hell won't impose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow a motion, which is the recommendation, and I'll speak against the motion. I live in the community. I've lived here for 20 years, and I feel that people think that this is going to be a retrospectively applied scenario and that we're going to disadvantage people. I completely disagree with that premise. What we are doing is we are providing greater flexibility and options for people going forward into the future, which is not car focused but is public transport focused.
Again, I'm going to call that single person in the gallery to order. Show some respect, whether you agree with the opinion or not. This is a democracy and we should listen with respect. Thank you, Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. This change to the DCP is not throughout the entire North Sydney local government area. It is for about 15% of the local government area of DAs that are going to be submitted in that area, where public transport accessibility and mobility is massive and is going to increase with the introduction of the metro. We already have people living in North Sydney that have car spaces and don't want them, and they have to pay a premium to get into a market and buy something because that is the way the market operates. If you don't want a car space, then there is very few options in North Sydney where you buy something without paying the premium because a car space is attached. In these new developments, you will quite happily know what you are buying. And if you need a car space, then you can go and buy an apartment with a car space. This is about increasing the opportunities for people to use public transport and to not have a car. We are not imposing this on hugely residential areas. This is in the context of 15% of the local government area, which has been identified as having high transport accessibility. I really sometimes listen to some of the comments here today and wonder whether you actually have read the report. Because what the report says is this is not taking away people's car spaces that they have now. You buy according to your family needs. Yes, I've raised children. Yes, I have a car space. That is my choice, and I buy I buy what I need. But some people don't want a car space. They want a one-bedroom unit near the metro, and that is what we are looking at. We are looking at the 15% of the local government area where all of this accessibility is provided and is going to be provided. The metro will be a game changer. It will bring, and we know the density, we know where it's going to go. The idea that we are going to discriminate, I completely reject that. We are actually going to open up the market to even more people to come and live in North Sydney. So I will be voting against this motion, and if it fails, I'm foreshadowing the recommendation, which I think is a positive, future-focused step for North Sydney, not a regressive step.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
I too will, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I too will be speaking against the motion. As Councillor Berge said, less than 15% of the local government area will be affected by these changes. From the report, the proposed reduction in private parking represented by the draft amendment is a sustainable, considered and logical policy position to adopt in a highly accessible corridor that is the subject of very significant growth pressure. The proposed controls will continue to provide for a level of resident parking, albeit at a reduced rate, not a zero rate, a reduced rate. This is designed to take full advantage of the improved access represented by close proximity to excellent public transport and to build on the already existing trend towards more car-free households. New residents in these developments will have a choice, as Councillor Berge said, of purchasing an apartment with or without a car space. The precinct already has 24 to 28% of car-free households as of the 2021 census, which is higher than the LGA rate of 18.3%. There are over 6,200 car-free households in the LGA, and car ownership rates are falling. And that's again between the 2011 and 2021 census, and I would imagine it's probably falling even more. There will still be resident parking. There will still be visitor parking. There will be on-street parking. Families that buy 3-bedroom units will be able to have parking for a car if that is their preference. 3-bedroom apartments will have an allocation of 1 car space. Okay. I recommend that this is an excellent report.
Point of order, Mayor. Councillor Walsh, every 3-bedroom apartment will not have a car parking space.
Thank you. I'm ruling
7 out of 10 will.
No, I'm ruling.
It's
not
0.7%.
It's not true. It's not true. It's not in the report. I rule against you. Continue with your continue with your debate.
Okay. This is really it's a very excellent report, and I strongly suggest you read it because it responds to many concerns raised tonight by the local community.
So I'm going to leave on you're a bunch of Philistines.
Thank you. I'll call you to order.
It's wrong.
Excuse me, I'd ask that you leave. You have disrupted all night.
You are speaking against your residents and the people of the constituency.
What's his name?
I've said this is the most undemocratic council.
No, it isn't. And in fact, you're interfering with democracy because this is called a debate.
This is not democracy.
It is.
Let me tell you, you people
I'd ask
actually
that if you cannot
wrong.
maintain and control yourself and allow people who you don't agree with to speak, that is the end of democracy when you can't hear others.
You want debate, you're wrong.
It is a debate. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Welsh. If you would please continue. Councillor Welsh, you have the floor. Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yes, thank you. I would like to speak in support of the foreshadowed motion and against the motion itself. Well, for starters, I personally was elected for environmental change, for climate change related strategies. And while change is hard, this is directly decisions we have to make if we want to change anything. All levels of government are getting far too complacent and dragging their heels and saying, oh, we want to have change, but we don't want to have it now, not while we're still alive, not while we're still being affected by this. That is directly why we are having so much problems with climate change related disasters, which are recurring now. I will also say I have not lived in France or in European countries which were made before cars even existed, that were made to value transportation in the first place. I grew up in a place with terrible public transportation where people were afraid to use the buses or the trains after dark because they would get stabbed or robbed. I have lived in areas where there was one single bus to go to school, and if you missed it, you had to do the humiliating walk back to your house to wake your mum up, to make her drive you to the school in her pajamas. And of course, she was furious at that. I have lived in terrible situations, and Sydney is a godsend in comparison. Change will be hard, but I swear this is one of the best areas to implement this change and try and make this social movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Lamb said, this is difficult. I've made a few notes and there's so much to say in response to, I really appreciate the community coming out and giving us their views about their different situations. There's so many points to make. I'll try and keep it as short as I can, but you know, it's great to hear so many of our community say that they want to see reduced amounts of cars on the road. That's fantastic. And yes, we do need to deprioritise the car going forward into our future. But there is a disconnect between that and saying that everyone should have a car park in an increasingly dense area like North Sydney. So some of you may be aware, I campaign against this massive high-rise overdevelopment going in. And that is a key source. This state government dictated massive density is a key source of our growing problems around infrastructure, whether it be sporting and recreational space, whether it be our schools, or whether it be about getting a car park. It is very difficult for us to manage all that. But higher rates of car ownership increase car use. That is just indisputable across the board, across many, many studies. So this change, this relatively modest change, when you look at it in the context of our LGA, it will still provide a car space for the people that need one. It will still provide that choice. It will provide, under the amended rates, it will provide one car park per 3-bedroom apartment, as many current residents have.
Point of order. Can I just ask?
You've raised a point of order. What is your point of order?
It's not what's in the report. It's point 7. It's not one car space.
It's in the recommendation. It's in the report. It's in the addendum to the report. So I'm ruling against your point of order. Would you continue, please, Councillor Burke?
Thank you, Councillor. There is an amendment to the original rates put forward, and it's now 1 per 3-bedroom. So, you know, I support the foreshadowed motion and I support moving forward in a more sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencerley? Councillor Spencerley?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great example of where ideology meets practicality. And I think Councillor Mutton summed it up probably more eloquently than I can, which is there is a future where we don't have cars. But today, people want cars. We're taking office space out of North Sydney, out of these areas, and we've turned them into apartments, and we continue to turn them into apartments. We do this all throughout the LGA, and this pushes our ability where to work further out, further afield from our own LGA. We, in a number of ways, are driving the requirement to use cars to get to places because we aren't allowing people to work close. And if we want to actually fix the solution, like most of these wonderful cities that we've talked about, we create office space, or we at least don't decrease the amount of office space in the areas where we live. I'm in favour of Councillor Gibson's proposal. I don't believe this is what the community want. I know this is not what the community wants. We've not heard a single person here tonight saying, I'm hugely in support of less parking spaces in new developments in high density areas. It's factually not the case. We need to listen to our community. Our community wants to have the ability to drive to places in Sydney that are not convenient to get to by public transport. They want the capability to stay in the area when their children get to driving age. They want to be able to afford a place as as young parents where they can actually have the ability to work far away from where they live and still be able to take the kids to playgroup and have the kids have a good quality of life because it's practical to get them around. Councillors, we need to listen to our community.
Point of order, Mayor. Our community has all those opportunities and will continue to have all those opportunities under the promoted changes.
Yes, I will rule in favour of that in that you have... the fact is that there's not a deprivation there, but I just ask you to continue on.
They don't have the ability to do both, to have 2 car spaces, for example, for a family that has an 18-year-old, a 26-year-old and 2 people living in these new developments. The reality is nobody's here speaking in favour of less car spaces. The ideology is there, the practicality is not, and we need to listen to our community. This is not what our community wants, and therefore I support Councillor Gibson's motion and I encourage other councillors to do so.
Thank you. I'm going to speak very shortly from the chair before I give this to Councillor Gibson if she wishes to exercise her right of reply. I would speak strongly in support of Councillor Welsh and Councillor Beregi in that there seems to have been quite a disinformation campaign about what is actually happening here. It's not retrospective. These are prospective DCP changes that apply to a relatively small number of sites along the transport hubs of North Sydney, in Milsons Point, in the North Sydney CBD, and in Crow's Nest and St Leonard's. And the reason for this policy is that this council has to accommodate big height increases, has allowed big height increases under a succession of amendments to the local environmental plan in these very locations. And the reason for that is not only to meet the density requirements of the state government, but to ensure that that increase is based around proximity to public transport. At the same time, this council has adopted a transport strategy with a specific purpose to reduce the impacts of cars on the urban environment. We have adopted as a community a modal hierarchy that puts walking, cycling and public transport over the private car. We know, whatever, I understand others may disagree, but we do know that increasing parking supply, there is a direct link to induced traffic demand. Indeed, one of the speakers from Ethos Urban acknowledged that that was the case. It does result in increased congestion, and it also significantly reduces the uptake of alternative modes of transport. And when we talk about active transport, that includes car share, of which North Sydney is one of the most successful users of car share in metropolitan Sydney. We're suggesting this applies to 2 types of zones. It applies to R4 high density and B4 mixed use. Councillor Spencer, I have to disagree with you. This council is not taking away commercial spaces. These are provisions that only apply to those specific residential forms of development and only along transport hubs. This is 21st century planning. This is good planning, and this isn't taking anything away. You're not going to have your car removed. You're not going to be have to move because you can no longer accommodate your car. This is about housing choice, and frankly it contributes to housing affordability because there is there is work that has been done to show that increasing excavation increases the cost of the development, and it also increases the time it takes to put it up. So for a handful of less than 15% of the local government area, with a population in that area who already 28% do not have a car by choice. We know there is data that any day you can go onto any site and you can lease car spaces within this same corridor that these amendments are applying to. And the reason for that is that supply reaches demand. So this is about housing choice, and this is also about us addressing congestion and about addressing the amenity impacts of increased congestions within our local government area. And finally, it's not novel, it's not an experiment, because in 2015, this council adopted much more stringent parking rates in Crow's Nest and St Leonard's, and it didn't operate as a handbrake on development. It did not stop families and people and people of all different family dynamics to purchase and live in Crow's Nest and St Leonard's in the thousands of new units that have been built and occupied since 2015 with actually more onerous rates than what we're discussing here tonight. So we know that that the high density development that we're required to provide is along transport hubs, and this is a sensible and responsible and balanced approach to managing those impacts. And so for all those reasons, I will not be supporting Councillor Gibson's motion, and I will support the foreshadowed motion on the recommendation. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And some of the studies that you've been referring to there, well, all of them, they're all quite old. We're talking about studies that go back to 2015, 2017, 2014. We're in 2023 now, and we need to be making decisions based on how our residents feel right now, not how they're going to feel in 10 years, not how they felt back in 2014. We should be making our decisions based on what our community tell us now, and they're here and they're telling us. I can't believe the mood around this room is to ignore a room full of residents who have come to tell you how strongly they feel about an important issue.
Councillor Gibson, I'm calling you to order. Again, you're impugning motives of those around this table.
No, I'm just saying you're ignoring them. Shame. Look, I keep being silenced. People, I have a right to have a say, Councillor Baker, and I think the community agree with that. Please let me speak. Councillors around this room, I mean, if you're going to vote for the original motion, you are ignoring the speakers here. I'm sorry, we are. Now let's look at the figures again. We went out and we did our consultation. That's what good councils do. But 84%. It wasn't just a handful of people who responded. It was 340 people responded. And 84% said no. I mean, councillors, this is not, this is not a sort of a 51% versus 49% or something. The community have spoken. We must listen. There's not one councillor around this room that ran on an election platform of reducing car parking spaces. Not one. I think this is a huge surprise. A lot of people in this room might have voted for Sustainable Australia, Labor, the Real Independents, who knows what. I think this is coming as a big surprise to a lot of our residents who never anticipated this. Hey, if you are proposing a really big change in our community, do it at election time. Be honest with your residents. Put it on your brochures that you hand out. Put it on your how to votes. Don't spring it on them a year after
Mayor, point of
being
order.
elected.
Mayor,
Thank you.
point of order, Mayor. I campaigned on protecting our environment.
Yes,
Now,
thank
reduce
you.
car use.
And again, I would ask that you debate the policy and not the person.
I'm not debating.
You are.
any
You
people.
are
I'm not
by
debating any people. I'm
impugning
simply
the
saying
motives of your
these
fellow
weren't-
councillors.
These weren't election policies.
Stick to the policy.
That's exactly what I'm doing. Mayor, I'm actually sticking to the results of our community consultation. How many times do I have to say it? I've never been involved in a council like this. Our residents are here. They're telling us how they expect us to vote. I think councillors, you'll vote against. This will be at your peril if you just ignore this massive section of our community. First of all, if we will have councillors, we will have the community not bothering to take part in the consultation process again. Why would you? Why would you stay up writing a submission, coming to council to speak, getting your neighbours to write a submission, reading the report, considering it carefully? You know, it takes ages to write a submission. Or to come to council to speak. What time is it now? So 2 hours. Our residents who feel so strongly about this have sat in this room for 2 hours to tell us what they think, but we're still going to ignore them? I'd say at your peril, councillors, at your peril. I've never been so disappointed to see councillors stuck on something that they wanted to do to the point that they will ignore their community to carry on with to carry on regardless with what they want to do. I would urge councillors to think about what has been said around this room by councillors. Think what your public has said. You don't have to vote as a block. You know, it happens.
Thank you again.
Yeah,
Could you? That's your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to finish the sentence if I could. You don't have to vote as a block. We're
Again,
all
you're imputing.
individuals.
I'll refer you to clause 1511. It's an insult and an unfavourable personal remark. I ask that you withdraw and apologise.
All right, I totally apologise for saying that people might vote in a block.
Okay,
that never happens.
Councillor Gibson.
Be individuals, councillors.
Councillor
Vote
Gibson.
how the community wants you to vote.
Councillor, thank you. I'm putting the motion, Councillor Gibson's motion. All those in favour? That is lost. Councillor Beregi, you have a foreshadowed motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation.
And is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh. Is there any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. We now move. Thank you. I'll call you to order. We now move to the next item on the agenda. Item 1011, which is the issue of owner's consent for the development of Grosvenor Lane car park. There are a number of registered speakers. The first is Glenn Courier. If you would come forward to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. Glenn Courier from Neutral Precinct.
Thank you.
Speaking on behalf of the precinct. Our opinion is that we are in favour of the recommendation by senior and experienced council officers. The reason we're in favour of that is we're in favour of plazas within the Neutral Bay area, and this will bring an actual proposal to the table, and council can then either use that as a negotiating point or refuse it from that point. The other point with regards to this, and there's a couple of points that we think, we've had extensive consultation with the shopkeepers there a couple of years ago with the previous plan which came through. They have some needs and I think they should be considered. The other thing which I think is really important about this site is it is the crown jewel of spots to have a plaza or village green within Neutral Bay. There is no better spot. It will give great value to the people of Neutral Bay. It will give great value to the surrounding properties. And I think that we really have to be cognizant of that fact. It brings great value to the properties. The present proposal, which I've seen, or recommendation, has a ring road around it. I think a plaza should be contiguous on the way through, and I'd just like to bring that point up, that it should be like that. I also think that at this point, Coles has put a proposal in. There was other parties surrounding that, and I think that council should, once this proposal comes forward, should not ignore any other parties, because this is our chance to get a once in every couple of generations opportunity here, and it really is that big. I've only lived in this area for 50 years, but I haven't seen an opportunity like this, and this will be a big opportunity. We should get it right. We shouldn't accept the first proposal, and I mean that just like that. We should get the best one. I think we should have senior council officers negotiating. People have maybe played a few hands of poker, maybe you've got a poker face. I think we should actually keep the Young Street Plaza as a negotiating tactic till we've got the new one, so that people know we can pull out if we need to. But I really believe, let's get something forward on the table and just work from there, because at this point, we've never been this close to actually having this in the best possible spot ever, and to get it there would be truly something if it ever came to fruition, which maybe I'll see, maybe I won't, who knows.
Are there any questions of Mr Courier? Thank you for your participation. The next speaker is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. If you would come forward, please.
Okay, my name is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. I'm a local resident of Cremorne. I've lived there for 28 years. I'm also the convener of Neutral Bay and Cremorne Progress Association, which supports the revitalisation of Neutral Bay Town Centre. I don't have any conflicts of interest with respect to this item. I shop at Neutral Bay regularly and know both the Grosvenor Lane car park and the Woolworths car park well. I'm very aware of the deficiencies in the parking situation. Locals typically head straight for the council car park and circle around hoping for a space right outside the supermarket. When they can't find a space, they head for the Woolworths car park, which is poorly laid out and has spaces of substandard size. Neighbours of mine drive to other suburbs to do their shopping because of the poor parking in Neutral Bay. I used to take my parents to the hearing clinic in the Grove, but it was hard to get a disabled spot, and I started driving them to Belrose, to a clinic with better parking. Loading zones are often filled with illegally parked cars, so delivery vehicles double park to unload. Improved parking in the town centre would be welcome, as would a well-designed public plaza. Council's DCP requires development in this area to create a public plaza on the current car park site and relocate public parking underground and provide additional public car spaces. It is appropriate that Coles responds to Council's DCP. The configuration proposed by Coles has the potential to offer a superior outcome to that contemplated in the rescinded Military Road Corridor Planning Study. It is clear from the Council report that giving consent for Coles to lodge a DA does not mean Council is bound to accept their proposal. Council should insist on an outcome that provides significant public benefits and should walk away from a poor proposal. We have an opportunity which could allow the comprehensive reimagining of the Neutral Bay Town Centre. I urge you to vote in favour and let Coles develop and present their ideas. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the Speaker? Thank you very much for your participation.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Are you under the assumption that we're giving owners consent to Coles to lodge a DA?
Yes. I'm under the impression that that is what the motion is, that to give permission to owners' consent for the council car park land and other land that's owned by council.
But you do realise they can lodge a DA irrespective of whether or not we give owners consent to that?
They can lodge it. I understand that they, from the report, I've read the report, and I understand that that they can lodge a DA for their land.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, do you have a question?
So this is just one side, the Coles side. How do you feel about the other property owners in Neutral Bay that own properties right along Military Road? What happens to them? If Coles, do you think, is it first in, best dressed? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would hope that Coles, when they're developing a DA, will talk to residents and will talk to property owners and will talk to business owners and will develop a scheme which encompasses the potential future development of sites between the Grosvenor Lane car park and Military Road, and specifically allows potentially for a staged development. Because those sites between the Grosvenor Lane car park and Military Road, there is not just one owner there are several ownerships, and it's potentially they could be developed in a number of stages.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Tim Atkins. Again, if you could say your name and address and who you represent.
Certainly. My name's Tim Atkins. I'm representing Coles today, and I'll just dive straight in. So Coles has made a request to allow the council to ask the council to allow Coles to submit an application on their land and the car park land. Why do they want to do that? They want to develop a world-class experience for Neutral Bay customers, and that includes a new town plaza that has been designed to meet the community needs, an improved and integrated car park solution for Neutral Bay, a thriving retail environment for the specialty retailers and the service providers that Coles wants and desires to make it a successful shopping precinct. There's not sufficient time to cover all the issues today, so I'm just going to cover 4 quick ones. Why are we doing this? So Coles is doing this because at the end of November 24, Woolworths will vacate their store. Coles has 2 options. One is to redevelop the existing store in largely the same format that it is today, or there is, as was put previously, an opportunity to develop an integrated solution that addresses the desires of council expressed in the DCP, the desires of some community members, and it also has the opportunity to address the other landholders. We've been working for over 3 years communicating with the other landholders and some councillors on this issue, as well as other community groups. This is an opportunity for us to now formally put forward an idea for debate and to further consult with the community on how such a solution might be provided. We are well aware that not everyone agrees on how this should be developed, but without the ventilation of going through this process, it will never be possible to determine what the overriding expectations of the community are. And by council allowing us to put forward a development application, it will give the community the opportunity to debate the various aspects and to make a considered decision about how it is to be developed, if it is to be developed. The council, by giving this consent, does in no way consent to the application. The council does not give up its rights to determine how it develops the council car park. It owns the council car park. Despite any application being lodged or approved by us, the final determination of what is built will be determined by you, the council. And you will be able to decide exactly how the property is utilised for the community in the future.
That's the end of your...
So just to finalise my position, a new town centre, we want the opportunity to develop a new town centre that is designed to meet the community needs. We want to provide an improved parking, access and loading in the area. We all know there are safety issues with the current arrangement, and we want to create a thriving retail environment for the retailers, the service providers and ourselves to make this a successful precinct.
Thank you. Councillor Porras, do you have a question of the Speaker?
Yes, hi. Can I ask, why do you need owner's consent from council for our car park? Why don't you just lodge your DA?
It's a good question. It's a chicken and egg situation. So do you spend an awful lot of money developing plans and consulting with the community not knowing that the council will even allow you to submit an application? Or do you ask to be able to submit an application and then spend the money, a considerable amount of money, that is required to then consult with everyone, develop a concept plan and have that plan ventilated with the community?
Does Coles not have enough money to put in a DA?
Like all the...
Sorry. Don't answer that question. That was disrespectful and I'm calling you to order because you're impugning that Coles is... Councillor Boris, we're going to deal with people with respect and I ask that you do so. Councillor Gibson, do you have a question of the Speaker?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Mr. Atkins. Now, that was quite interesting, but one thing you stated quite clearly, and it's on the record, and it's got me very interested. You said that you've had and Coles have had discussions with some of the councillors.
Yeah.
Now, are there minutes of those meetings? Will you be able to provide us with? Could you provide us with minutes of those discussions?
Yes,
so we know what happened. This council is committed to transparency.
Sorry, you're arguing again. You've asked the question. You've asked the question directly. The directly was, will you provide minutes of those
will
meetings?
you provide the minutes and a record of all meetings that you've had with councillors about your Coles development?
If that is a request you're asking, I'm sure we're happy to provide it.
Good, thank you. I'll look forward to it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr Atkins. A question with regard to other stakeholders, other property stakeholders.
Yep.
I'm sure you'd be aware, and in your statement you mentioned that you have been communicating with them. What will you be doing going forward to make sure that they are properly communicated with and so forth with regard to your plans for that shared space that they also front going forward?
Yeah, so we've been having individual meetings with those property owners. We will continue to offer to have individual meetings with those property owners, and we will also invite them to any of the community consultation process that we believe will be part of this application. Using the council's consultation guidelines, will be opportunities for those people to also speak in front of the other community members if they so choose to do so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Lapouris.
So I just want to understand. You said that it's a chicken and the egg process and you're not sure if council will accept your DA. Couldn't you submit a DA with the LEP and, that goes to the we don't go through DAs.
Sorry, point of order.
Councils.
Mayor. My understanding is that you can't submit a DA for a property that isn't yours.
Yes, it's about landowners' consent because
that requires landowners'
what's
consent.
included, it's in the report, Councillor Lapouris.
Yes, but why do they need consent to our land? For what purpose?
Well,
they can lodge a DA for their land and build their development in the LEP.
Councillor Lapouris,
Yes.
you have to ask a question that's direct, succinct and without argument. You've asked the question, you've asked it before and it was answered, but
It wasn't
Mr
answered.
Atkins, if you wish to answer it again.
Sure. So it is an obligation to have the owner's consent to lodge a development application and have it determined. So we're seeking the council support for having to lodge the application.
But you own the land that you'd be lodging your DA on.
Not all the lands. So that the lands that would be covered, if you're building a plaza on the
But
council...
why would Coles be building a plaza? That's my question.
Oh, we are offering to build the plaza as part of our application, and we would be funding that building under a voluntary planning agreement in order to facilitate this development.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr Atkins, for your participation. The next speaker is Greg Caritas. If you would come forward and give your name, address and who you represent.
My name's Greg Caritas. I'm Arcadia Investment Group, well known to many of you. I'm confused because I know Tim's scheme. It hasn't changed. Tim represents Coles. Level 3 of that scheme that you're showing will be most likely access to their basement car park, a ramp down. They will be putting loading on basement 3. They've done the scheme. Why don't they show it to you Why isn't it consistent with the previous future direction paper? You guys, one of the first minutes or actions that you did in the first council meeting when you were elected was to rescind the last future direction. The last lady said, I hope they would consult papers, the various landowners. We met with Coles and Titanium 3 weeks ago. We said, can you even indicate, will there be 5 car spots on grade? No, we can't. Can you tell us less than 5? What can you tell us? Is this, what's the purpose of this meeting? What are you here to tell us, right? This is their version of consultation. You'll hear from small businesses that have had the same consultation. We've been in this area and on that land for 70 years. We were part and spent $1 million over on a process on the previous future direction, engaging with them. There's a principles document there that says how it should work with various landowners. Why are they not being given any guidelines on what design principles that you expect for the businesses and community and landowners of Neutral Bay? This was called a future direction paper for Neutral Bay. It was about maintaining a small village. There is nothing about that on their application. This has now become about one landowner getting a car park, access to a car park, when Woolworths across the other side were putting their own car spots and 100 car spots on their land, and that was rejected. These guys are using public land when they can easily achieve these car spots on their land. They do not need to commercialise public land to sell their residential apartments, to put their loading facilities and access to their loading facilities via public land. We have the means to do the plaza. We can do the plaza without them. You do not need to sell public land to Coles. They have a scheme and they should share it with you. And you should have
If I
design
could just
principles.
intervene, that isn't correct. What's before us is not to sell public land.
I know, that's
tonight.
the point. They're
Thank
not
you.
actually even paying for it. So the land has a commercial value.
No, what's before us tonight is effectively an administrative thing about whether we sign and give permission for them to lodge their
And why
DA.
did we have a future direction a study that's been replacing the previous future direction paper that has a 15-month time frame that's meant to finish in mid-24? The consultation process hasn't even started, submissions hasn't even occurred, and we're already granting one party the right for a DA over that land. So we may comment and allow them to determine the vision for Neutral Bay. When have we ever heard of a supermarket being interested in anything other than the profits for their shareholders? We have landowners, we have 50 businesses that operate off that car park. They will be without a car park in more than likelihood without 3 years, for 3 years without a car park. Their businesses will be demolished. Coles has bought the Woolworths site and will evict Woolworths out of their site. They will not be granted an extension of lease. They assume that commercial risk when they bought that property. They are a developer. They are going to benefit from the sales, $80 million sales, $10 million of EBITDA in development. They should abide by the process that this council approved, and there's a future direction town centre planning study underway. They can wait 6 or 12 months.
3 minutes if you just finish your thought.
There are a lot of things that we would like to see. We'd like to see one row of car spots maintained for short stopping car spots. We'd like to see principles applied to any DA that's been done, not just comment on what's been lodged. We would like to see our service road that now services the rubbish removal that no one sees, these loading bays that are full, moved underground for the benefit to move service cars off the road. Why will they only be the ones that enjoy putting their service facilities on basis number 3? Allow us to put a submission forward on the things that need to be done. But to approve that today, I ask you not to, because that is putting one party's interests before the interests of many stakeholders, many landowners, and you rescinded the last future direction paper. You could have amended the height, but you've denied us.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions? Councillor Gibson.
Yes. So what? So you're saying you really, we're hearing two different stories here. So you're saying you haven't really had productive discussions with Coles and that you don't know what they're planning? Is that right?
Under the future, we know what the previous scheme is. The scheme, I believe the current scheme is fairly consistent. It hasn't moved. It has about 100 car spots being provided on public land, which is meant to replace the car spots on grade, which is actually just primary for the benefit of their customers. It's access through travellators that go up to their supermarket?
Yeah.
What vertical transportation and connectivity will be done for the other small businesses? If you want to stop and grab a chicken from Mr. Gordon's who's here tonight, grab your dry cleaners from the dry cleaners who's here tonight, what access will you be given? You'll have to park in a basement car park, access through a supermarket and come up. But yes, we have met with them. We spent 1 year, as per the previous future direction and the encouragement of the current strategic planners, to meet with council and come up with a scheme that was agreed. We had a staging line and the way that that should be conducted that would mitigate the impact. That hasn't been adopted and that hasn't been approached. Our latest meetings with them is saying that they have that all of this will be designed in the future. The scheme hasn't evolved, and we feel like we're just being held in the dark now. We were told, we said they're going to now place a DA once the paper was rescinded. They said it doesn't matter. We're speaking to the strategic planners. I have a lot of respect for them, but we were told that the process that you've now adopted will be the process, and it will not be set by Coles' demands for timing. We said this process does not meet Coles' timing. Here we are sitting here today looking to accept a DA application on Coles because the strategic paper that you've put forward doesn't meet their timing. Of the future direction paper, 3 of the developers are putting in, if you include this, non-compliant DAs. The landowners along the car park on Military Road are the only ones of that last strategic paper that have been compliant and haven't lodged a non-compliant DA. We're long-term landowners, our reputation is important, the small businesses are important to us. I know that anyone will say that will gladly let me speak on their behalf. That is not right that we sit here and abide by the process that you've put in forward, and now that one party is allowed to do a DA. 6 to 12 months delay is not a problem.
Thank you. You answered the question, Mr. Laporte. Councillor Laporte.
Mr. Carides, do you think that if Coles closes down that area to build and it takes 2 or 3 or I don't know how many years, do you think the businesses like Mr. Gordon's, the dry cleaners, do you think they'll be able to survive?
There'll be some that will survive. What is the compensation that's been offered to them? Who's offering the compensation? There's been no speak about staging or compensation. But there is no doubt that many businesses, with the hardships of COVID, small businesses are the backbone of this community. They serve the community, and a good portion of those businesses, at least 30%, probably will not survive.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Rick O'Connell. If you would come forward and give your name.
Thank you, Mayor Baker and fellow councillors, for allowing me to address you this evening. I'm the CEO of Arcadia, which owns and operates several properties in Neutral Bay on behalf of the Carides family, and we're owned by the Carides family. As Greg said, they've been there almost 70 years. In terms of my experience and the business I lead on behalf of Greg, we're not against progress for Neutral Bay. We want progress in Neutral Bay. We want to see things happen. I think one of the key issues for us is that we've been abiding by the process set forward by the strategic planners, in that we've been told to wait till March 24 once the planning study's been complete. I think the main issue for us is really around not the fact that there's progress, it's the fact that one party is being allowed to go before that process has actually occurred. We ask you to defer this motion so that an open process can actually be run, which we can participate in, so that when the owner's consent is finally issued to a party, it can contain principles for design and conditions that ensure the livelihood of the small businesses and also ensures the future evolution of the Neutral Bay area in a succinct way and independently of each other, so things that can work congruently into the future. We're ready and willing to act tomorrow. So all we would need is a couple of months process in order to put a concept to. Ultimately, that will mean that you've got 2 proposals in hand that you can then assess and look at. And we think that that would be a great outcome if you want to progress earlier than your own planning study. If you don't, then we're happy to wait. If you want to do something sooner and faster than what you've outlined, we're ready and willing to act. In terms of what we'd like to see, if you do approve this motion this evening, there's certain conditions that we've outlined in our submission. Hopefully that's been succinct and clear, but I'll just go through a summary of those. We suggest that a row of parking exists throughout the development of Coles and the construction. It will be a 2 to 3 year period. It's a 9 metre excavation at minimum, and it will significantly impact the survival of the small businesses. We would recommend that you keep that basement line to the first row of parking to enable that, and also allow the future of the Neutral Bay development on the southern side such that it can continue into the future, and also that basement could be extended in the future, and all the other logistics could be coordinated in a timely manner over time. Once the planning study has actually been complete, people have very clear visibility as to what they can then develop. We would suggest that you require Coles to lodge a DA that is fully LEP and DCP compliant without exception, given they are using public land. We would also ask that there's a sunset date on the owner's consent such that it's not just sitting there for a very long period of time. Other owners, such as ourselves, would like to lodge a submission, and we wouldn't want that to exist over the community car park for an extended period. We believe that a new community centre should also be included to anyone that's dealing with the car park. That was foreshadowed in the previous Future Directions paper, and we believe you're only going to get one opportunity to do that, and it should be linked to the car park, and it should be included as any condition for those that wish to use it. Coles should underpin, if they're going to disrupt the entire car park, the viability of the retailers, because they are the lifeblood and they've been there for a long period of time. The plans, as I mentioned, should take account of the future potential of the future development areas of the adjoining landowners in a coordinated sense for basements, logistics, service lanes, along with easement and access rights. To be frank, Coles waiting 3 months for another proposal from us, if you would like that, and we will have the backing of the small retailers of Neutral Bay, is not a larger ask, considering that they don't have a current supermarket at the moment and they're really acting to usurp a competitor. So we would ask if you would like an alternative proposal to delay this decision and allow us to do that. Alternatively, as I mentioned, we would ask that you put those conditions in that consent up front, because if you allow Coles to lead this process, I hear that you're the landowner and you can change things, but ultimately if they spend a couple of $1 million on a DA and you say no, that's going to end in a quagmire regardless. So you're better off setting our parameters now, or allowing others in a publicly open process to put forward a position so you can decide on the merits of both.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the Speaker? Councillor Gibson.
How long, what sort of deferral do you think Council would need to consider the points that you've raised here tonight?
If you wish to just proceed with a sole operator, I would ask that it's at the next council meeting and you consider our proposal in terms of the conditions to be met. If you would like a concept, we'd need 2 to 3 months to put a concept forward, and we see no reason why that shouldn't occur or is unreasonable, given the planning study is not complete till March 24.
You'd be willing to sit down in a room with Coles and work with them and you know, for a good outcome for the whole village?
I think ultimately asking two parties that are not aligned on the outcome of where something is, the vision ultimately needs to be led by council. So having council as an arbitrator may not be a position that council would like. So I think it would be better off if there was two concepts received and council can then assess those on their merits.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Spenceley.
Yeah, well, my question just requires a clarification through maybe you, Mayor, to the General Manager. Is it possible, or maybe...
No, we'll wait until we have the debate. We've still got two more speakers.
To ask my question.
Well, if you ask a question, this is a question of speakers.
Okay. If it was possible, and this is my question, whether it is not possible for council to give consent to two parties at the same time to lodge or to go ahead and do the work to propose a DA, would you consider and be involved in that process to prepare a DA in parallel with Coles?
100% we would. I think ultimately I disagree with Tim. You don't have to get to a DA point to get comments and feedback and an understanding of key design principles from council. What I believe is two concepts which are not DAs. They don't take millions of dollars. They take a little bit of time, but two concepts coming to council that can then be published to the community be published to the small businesses behind us, and then we can assess which option's better and debate it. And ultimately, there may be a level of integration of the two concepts that ultimately it causes a really good outcome for the community in Neutral Bay. We just beg you to please allow us to put something forward so that you're not running with a sole operator and running so far ahead of your own planning state.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No, thank you for your participation. We have Dimitri Yanakis. If you could give your name, address and who you represent.
My name's Dimitri Janakis. I am the owner of Blue and White Dry Cleaners. We are probably one of, if not the longest standing businesses in the Neutral Bay Village. We've been there for just under 55 years. And myself and a lot of the other small businesses behind me have a lot of concerns with giving owners consent to Coles to do essentially what they want on public land. So my questions are, or my statements are, why is Coles given the right to lodge a DA on the council car park, Waters Lane and Coopers Lane without any guidelines? Coles are allowed to dictate the future of 50 small businesses who rely heavily on the car park. The car park needs to be integrated with the existing small businesses with cars and pedestrians. Where will the access be? What level will it be at? How will the village be accessed? Is it via the supermarket? Why is Coles allowed to have a loading facilities on level B3 but no service lane for all the small businesses? The biggest issue for us is, with the potential of a 2 to 3 year excavation, we have no doubt that it will be devastating for all the small businesses who rely so heavily on that car park. For our business to survive, we need direct access. We service over 50 other dry cleaners across Sydney, the Lyric Theatre, Opera House, State Theatre, as well as many other productions, and without the ability to directly access our premises, we'll have no choice but to relocate. And Tim is right, we have had some form of communication, but in saying that, we've been shown no plans and have no idea what they're doing. So myself and all the other small businesses behind me are really concerned. That's why we're here tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Gibson, you have a question?
So you'd like to see this, what do you want council to do? What do you think's reasonable here to keep everyone happy? Are you asking for a deferral?
Well, definitely asking for a deferral, but also, let's conduct the planning study and see what the people want.
Yeah.
No one has ever come and asked us what we would like to see from the area, and we've been there for just under 55 years. Mm-hmm. We're the landowner as well, so we have a high interest in what's going to happen.
All right, so...
Thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
What would you like to see happen there?
Look, there's no doubt that an evolution is needed. What the car park offers is a bit dated, but in saying that, it does work. It does bring people to the area. All the businesses are thriving. They're all activated, and like Greg from Arcadia said, something can be done, but whatever has to be done needs to be, suitable for the small businesses also.
Would you see that area being converted into a plaza, outdoor dining with underground parking, assuming it's not Coles?
Yeah.
Is that something that's good for the area there?
Look, to be honest, from my perspective, I think having some form of on-grade parking is crucial because, I've got vanfuls of work coming constantly throughout the day, and without the ability to offload it straight into my business, it just wouldn't work for us. And that's what we have there. We've got loading zones, we've got parking, everything available right at the front. So we're not saying no to some sort of plaza, but I think the most crucial thing is having some form of on-grade parking.
Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. Given that what we're considering tonight is not a DA as submitted by Coles, but the process of submission of a DA.
Yeah.
Are you concerned? Your main interest is in preserving the southern end of.
Well, yeah,
Golden Lane.
where the majority of the small businesses
Right,
are.
so if that DA were not to include encroachment into that southern part, would you be perfectly happy with that?
Well, if they're lodging a DA on their land, well, they can.
Yes, but I mean, involving some
Well,
work
yeah,
on the
definitely.
car park, but still allowing access to the southern end of the car park, you would have no problem with that?
No, I think that'd be ideal for all the small businesses.
Thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ivan Lulich. Thank you, and if you could again give your name and thank you. Give your name and address and who you represent.
My name's Ivan Lulich. I own Priceline Pharmacy in Neutral Bay. We own 3 shops in Neutral Bay, and between Caritas's, the Lulichs and Blue and White, we've been there for more than 40 years. Now, going back at that time, all that car park you see was the back of the shops. There was like sheds and lawns and all that sort of stuff. So we went to council, and council approached us, and we thought the best thing we could do is to change that area to what we have today. And it's and it worked. And you even have Theo's liquor shop was at the front, Military Road. He moved it to the back, and I thought that's a brave move. And that village works. So unless we can make it better, which I don't know how, you will lose all those people because there's 2 or 3 years of building. It's got to be devastating. So, of course, I like change. They just had a renovation done 12 years ago and upgraded the whole car park 12 years ago. So if we can look at upgrading it or doing something better, but to lose 2 or 3 years of building and to lose those 50 businesses that are there, they're not going to come back. You won't get them back. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the speaker? Councillor Santa.
Sorry, I just asked a similar question to the one I asked before. You would be perfectly happy if there was no encroachment on your southern end of the car park?
Well, I don't know how. Look, we need to have that mobility with vehicles and things like that, some parking, if you're unloading zone to unload. Where else are you going to do it? Military Road's going to be a big freeway soon, you know. So, but how do you make it better? You know, what we've got there now is fantastic.
Or no worse?
But no worse. I mean, if you're going to do all these changes, you end up worse. I'm only looking as a retailer. You know, that service ideally goes to Neutral Bay, and she loves that little car park at the back. And we've got 3 coffee shops, right? And they all close at 3 o'clock. If you can have a plaza, what are you going to have? Coffee shops everywhere and trees, and it's just not going to work.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. You have a question?
So, what would you like to see happen
Well,
for this to be
I don't mind a
deferred
change.
to-
I don't mind a change. But what we've got there now, if we can fix it up and regrade it or whatever, that's fine. But show me something whereby it's not going to affect all the retailers.
Okay.
We don't want to change the mix we got there now. And having a plaza, you're going to have coffee shops and restaurants and that's my feeling anyhow. But that land, as I said, that land we gave to council for our use.
Right.
It's not anybody's right. It's for the community. You can't get somebody else, some company to come in there and say, oh, we're going to use that land.
So do you think council needs to just consider this a bit more rather than make a decision tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't worry, we'll be talking to the people in Neutral Bay because I know all my customers they're all up in arms about what's happening.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to speak to the people in Neutral Bay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Could you turn your light off? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lulich. Thank you for your participation. Councillor Beregi, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Santa.
And I'll move an amendment. An amendment for deferral to Councillor a councillor discussion and workshop.
I'll take that as a foreshadowed motion because it's really the opposite of what we're dealing with, and that's how I'm ruling. But it's a foreshadowed motion. Explain what it is.
Okay, we're clearly, boy, this is a night of nights. Our community are still here telling this council what they want us to do. And we've heard from everyone that this is, we can't make a decision on this tonight. Half the landowners haven't been consulted. Now, I'm frankly, this needs to be deferred, even just for a couple of weeks. We can have a councillor workshop and work out a reasonable way forward. I've heard that some councillors have had meetings and private discussions with the Coles representative. This letter that came from Guide Consulting to Mr Hill on the 31st of March, that should have been immediately distributed to all councillors. You know, an important letter like this, asking for landowners' consent, but councillors, I read my papers over this long weekend, so we could have, I can't speak now. We could have been privy to this information ages ago. I'm not going to be rushed by an entity like Coles into making a decision tonight. We need to do the best for Neutral Bay. And it's not first in, best dressed. All the landowners have to be considered. And I know the owner of Priceline who's speaking here tonight, not only does he own commercial properties, he's also a resident in this LGA, and many of these small business owners are. We just need to defer this, have a workshop, discuss what everyone has brought up, get some more details on it. I can't believe that you can just try to push this through now. It's irresponsible. It would be irresponsible and reckless for council not to take note of the other landowners who are here present tonight.
Thank you. If you could turn off your microphone. Councillor Spenceley, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Lepouris.
Thank you, Mayor. I've had a rather short time on council, but in that time I've had a real passion for doing something in the plaza there, or in the car park, Freudian slip, the plaza. It would be fantastic for the community, I think, to have outdoor area and outdoor space. I think it'd be fantastic for the businesses. Every time I've tried to do something there, every time I've kind of supported an idea, I've been told that, well, we have to wait for the planning study. You know, we talked, and I think Councillor Burke eloquently put it about Young Street, that let's not make a decision until we get the planning study. So I'm a little surprised that with days of notice on something as large as this, we're proposing to provide consent to Coles. Now, I will note, consent doesn't mean approval for a DA, right? But this is a pretty major thing to give consent of council land. You know, it is a process that I've continually been told by council staff is something we don't really assess, against without a town planning study. Yet suddenly everyone.
To the group point of order, that's not correct. But so if you continue.
Point of order. This is not giving consent for use of council land. This is really surely giving consent for the submission of a DA.
Yes, and that's why I'm.
And so it's not really consent
I've ruled on the point of order.
for the use of council.
Sorry, there are too many lights on. Councillor Mutton and Lepouris, could you take your lights off? I am aware you both wish to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not aware that there's a difference between giving consent and giving consent to potentially do. I mean, we're being asked to give consent to use council's land in the form of a DA and a proposal.
Technically, no, that's incorrect, and that's why I'm ruling on the point of order. What you're being asked to do is to give permission, effectively, to lodge the DA. This isn't to allow the use of the land. That will form part of a DA, and so it is technical, but there is a difference.
I'll note that. It does seem like this is likely to be voted in favour of. In that case, I would potentially like to propose some amendments that I think is important that if this does go ahead, protects the small businesses, protects the community and gets a better result for us, for council and the community, which is our job. So I think if this is going to be proposed, and I think this is being rushed and I'm not in favour of it, but if this is going to be voted on and approved tonight, I think council consent should be granted on the basis that any final DA proposal would not advantage council, or that council be convinced that any final DA proposal will not advantage Coles over the small businesses. I think that is a critical, important point.
Will you take that on?
My only issue with that, Councillor Spencer, is we're not looking at the DA at the moment. We haven't seen a DA. The point is that we are being asked to give owner's consent for the lodging of a DA. And I would also say that council can withdraw that consent at any time.
Absolutely.
And it is in council's interest to have all parties together.
So is that a yes or no?
I
So
already think
taking
that
it
it's
on.
here, that council notes consultative and collaborative design process, and I think it's already in the motion.
I think it needs to be clearer than a collaborative design process. I think it
Okay,
needs
so
to be
the
clear that it
answer
protects.
from the mover is no.
So what do you want as words?
The words I would appreciate you considering is that any proposal that we're giving consent to present is on the basis that it does not advantage Coles over the small businesses. Well, this is an important part of council's role, is to measure that.
How about the council considers the interest of all?
Look, my personal preference is we have a lot of small businesses here, and I think that they're concerned, and we as a council need to listen to that concern and provide them with something concrete that allows them to feel we've got their interests at heart as well.
What's currently on the table is you are in the debate. You've asked the movers if they will amend the motion as it is before the council. Do you have an answer to that, Councillor Berry?
I'm happy to amend number 3, that council notes a consultative collaboration design process will be required to be entered into for any future plans, and this includes the consideration of all stakeholders so that not one stakeholder is advantaged.
Okay, are you prepared to take that on as the seconder? Thank you. You've still got part of your 5 minutes. Are you continuing?
Yes, if
your
I
debate?
could, sorry. The consent is granted to lodge the DA on the basis that extensive community consultation be done on the design, and that consultation is done in conjunction with council.
Continue.
Sorry, that's a proposed.
Yeah.
That's a proposed an amendment.
Proposed amendment. Further amendment. Words again.
Again, I think it's words, and actually what's being proposed already incorporates all of that, so I'll say no. This is a motion, not a discussion paper. The motion is what if it's passed, is what the council staff then act upon, and I think that is fairly succinct in what is being put forward at the moment.
I think that strengthens it, but if you're not willing to accept the amendment, we note that another amendment that council consent be withdrawn, and at any stage the final design that is to be presented is not in line with the benefits to the residents and the local businesses.
I don't think we can take that on because we don't know what's before us.
Well, that's why it says once we see what's before us, if it's not in line with the local businesses.
So just restating the law, which is that's what council can do.
I think it's making it absolutely council can do it. I would like to make it explicit so that the residents know that this is how we'll be assessing it, that Coles know this is how we'll be assessing it, and it's explicit for everyone involved that this must be, and the consent is only contingent upon this being in the interests of the residents and the small businesses.
I'm not prepared to take that on. It's not just in the interest of the residents and the small businesses. It's of a greater interest than that. And as the Mayor has said, we already have obligations in terms of what we grant consent on, so I won't be taking that on. I already think it's embedded in the motion.
Okay, well, that's the end of my proposed amendments. I do think we are rushing this. I'm disappointed that we're rushing it, and I think that we have the lifeblood of the community here, which is our local small businesses. I'm in favour of doing something in the space. I have been since being elected. I think it's critical that we actually improve that area Neutral Bay is a key icon in Sydney and needs to have a space that's worthy. But I think we've got negotiating power. We need to be using that, and we need to be using that to make sure that this isn't advantage to one party over the small businesses and the residents get a good result. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lapouris was next, and then Councillor Mutton. Councillor Mutton, if you would just turn off your microphone because we're having issues with the numbers, and then I'll come to Councillor Lamb. I can see you there.
Councillors, I'm really worried about this. From what I understand, Coles is a developer. They're going to build apartments. They own what they own. They're going to build parking underneath their apartments. And we just voted, the hypocrisy, we just voted and said that we don't need parking anymore and that developments shouldn't have this much parking.
I'm going to call you to order. That is not what we voted on. That is an absolute impugning the other councillors. That was not
we just
what was
voted to
before.
reduce council
to
rates
reduce parking
in a section of
certain
the LGA.
areas. Yes.
And we just spoke, a lot of councillors spoke that there's a reduction in car use and that we don't need this many cars.
Councillor Lapouris,
Okay, I retract that.
know, thank you.
So Coles needs to build their apartments and build their parking underneath. And then they also need parking, obviously, for their supermarket. So we're giving them owner's consent to build that parking under our...
Again, I'm drawing you to order. That is not what is before us tonight. It's not to give consent for them to build
we're giving them
underground
owner's
parking.
consent.
No, we're giving them...
So that they
it
can
is
lodge
not-
a DA
Yeah,
that
to lodge a DA.
includes,
Stop
that
there.
includes
Yeah.
parking underneath our council area. We don't need... Okay.
Councillor Lapouris is, point of order, Mayor. Councillor Lapouris is correct. We're inviting a
So, thank you. I understand you've raised a point of order. I'm ruling against
I'll
it.
retract that too. My point is we don't need to give owners consent. Coles can lodge their DA on their land if they wish to include the council car park. I'm sure that they can afford to include the council car park. Present it to us. Show us what they plan to do. Show us that they plan to protect the small businesses in the community, and then we can go and help them do whatever they want to do and have a great outcome. We don't need to grant owners' consent at this point in time. We don't need to do that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lapouris, if you turn off your microphone. Councillor Mutton.
Thank you, Mayor. I would sure hate to run a small business. It's an uphill battle. We have been talking about Neutral Bay. We have been talking about the need for consultation. We have sanctioned the establishment of a new committee to enable further consultation with the people of Neutral Bay. We are aware that Coles purchased this site many years ago. We are all aware of the timeline that they knew when they purchased this site, when Woolworths' tenancy would be up. And suddenly, the gun is to our head. We need to move quickly. Really? We haven't been moving very quickly. I have been to briefings from Coles where I have seen vague sketches of what it might look like. I have been warned that these sketches are confidential and can't be communicated to anyone. Frankly, I feel like I'm being gamed, and I don't like that. We are being asked, you can call it consent, you can call it what you like. We are being asked to get into the Coles canoe and row forward in their canoe without any consultation with the small businesses that neighbour Coles. I think that's outrageous. And here tonight, I do not support the proposal put forward by Coles. What I do support is that we consult with the businesses in Neutral Bay, Coles, big and small, and we work out what they want to keep Neutral Bay Village viable during the reconstruction period. And I'm absolutely opposed to this notion that Coles needs to build whatever it is they want to build. Unless someone comes up with a proposal that sees all of the businesses survive, unless someone comes up with a proposal that sees that village continuing to service the community during the reconstruction period, of course I'm opposed to it. Why would I turn my back on the community? Why would I turn my back on the small and big businesses of Neutral Bay? I want them all to come together and work out what's best for our community. And I can tell you one thing, what's best is not getting in the canoe with one particular landowner. That can That can never be a council servicing its community. No. That's a council, dare I say it, picking sides. No way.
Thank you. Are there, Councillor Lamb was next, and then I can see Councillor Burke and Councillor Welsh. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I will be voting to pass this motion because I view a step in any progress to be slightly inconsequential, especially considering we can reject or redact our approval at any time. I also want to say when we do approve or go forward to approve a DA, I extremely support any additional research or consultation into social or financial impacts onto the small businesses, as I am a very strong believer that at the expense of the project itself, that we need to do further consultation before we start any project. The council does not need another rush project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. This is someone said the jewel in the crown of this area, and I concur with that, having not currently but previously lived in Harrison Street in the area for several years. It's a wonderful part of our LGA. So a couple of quick questions, or points. We need more green open space in that area. So in my view, that vision is something we should pursue. However, I have a question for the General Manager through you, Mayor. The concept flagged by Councillor Spenceley, which disappointingly he didn't propose it as an amendment. Is there the potential to offer the opportunity to lodge two DAs and give that opportunity with owners' consent?
The General Manager has referred that question to Mr Hill, the Director of City Strategy.
Madam Mayor, councillors, yes, in simple terms, yes, we can go through the same process afforded to Coles, where they're in a position to lodge a DA, they advise us formally, which is the letter you have, and we can do the exact same process. It'll be up to the other group, if you like, to articulate as much detail as they like as per that letter. I haven't seen the schemes that they're looking at, but if that's available for them to put in a letter and put forward to us, they'll get afforded the same process.
Sorry, do you have another question for Mr Hill?
No more questions.
Okay,
Thank you,
Mr Hill.
May I finish?
Not quite yet. We're in the middle of the debate from... Well, not at this point. Thank you. You have the floor, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. So to continue that point, I also just want to refer to something Councillor Gibson said tonight. We had an open briefing in which Coles presented to all councillors being invited. I just wanted to make that point, just in case there was any concern that there was something else happening. All councillors were invited to a briefing with Coles, and I found personally Coles to be consultative in that process. And my strong impression is that they are looking for a good community outcome. I don't always say that of developers, but that was my impression at that point. So I'd like to propose an amendment, Mayor, that other interested parties can also lodge a DA with owner's consent.
Councillor Santa, will you take that on as a seconder?
Being offered.
That's taken on by the mover.
Could I ask
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Burke to add another point to that? Can I ask you to add another point to that amendment, Councillor Burke?
Possibly
Well,
Councillor Gibson, but that was really my only point I wanted to make, to be honest.
We just heard that the other landowners would need a little bit of time. Can't we, can Coles
I-
wait till...
Okay, thank you. It's the answer to that. Are you prepared to take? Is the it's no longer Councillor Burke's amendment. It is in the motion. Is the mover prepared to take that additional deferral on?
The Coles waits until...
Yeah.
So they can both be lodged together. We have to be fair.
Okay.
Would you take that on, Councillor Bergie?
No, Mayor. Coles have lodged a DA, have asked for owner's consent. Every other owner can do exactly the same, and I encourage them to do so. This is going to be a very long process.
Thank you. That's. Will you get to speak to your? You reserved your right of reply. I still.
No, she moved an amendment.
Oh, well.
Don't worry.
Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to re-emphasise, we've heard a few pejorative statements tonight that if we support this notion, essentially we're really favouring one particular developer over everybody else, including local businesses and the community. And we're just getting into a canoe with one developer. I think people are thinking ahead of themselves. This report only deals with the issue, I'm quoting directly from what's been submitted to us. This report only deals with the issue of owner's consent, which is required for Coles to integrate the plaza proposal in its DA. It is important to note that the issue of owner's consent does not imply or infer approval of either the application or the plaza design. Any claim to the effect that provision of owner's consent means that, quote, there is no obligation nor statutory requirement for Coles to engage with either council or the community on the plans to be submitted. As I received recently, that was a direct quote from a submission that I received recently, in writing from an interested party is simply, in law, incorrect. When we see Coles DA, Council will have every right, after due consultation with the community, to reject if it is against the community's interest. This submission from an interested party purports to contain a, quote, sole proposal from Coles for a subterranean car park under the current Grosvenor Lane car park, which encroaches on other users' requirements. But until we see what Coles will be submitting to in their DA, we in fact have no idea of the area involved and the size of its sought-after so-called encroachment under the car park. This submission, in the absence of a DA, seems to be based on conjecture. No one, except perhaps Coles, knows what is to be contained in their DA, and this is crucial in our consideration of this issue. I'm confident that after submission by Coles of its DA, there will be sufficient allowance for consideration by the community, including all local businesses other than Coles, and the council of its proposed development to ensure that all parties' needs and concerns are met. The outcome I desire is that all the businesses in the area will continue to be able to run their businesses profitably under an area-wide LEP which enables them to do so, while at the same time giving the community a desperately needed new public space for them to enjoy. This could lead to not just win-win for Coles and other businesses, but win-win-win because it includes the community as well. I recommend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. I apologise that you didn't get to speak to your motion, so I'd invite you to do that now.
Mayor, I'm happy to leave my right of reply.
Okay, in which case I'll speak. I think there are no other speakers, but there are. Councillor Welsh and Councillor Santer, if you could please turn off your...
And I have a question too after.
Basically, I just want to... I just want to reiterate exactly what Councillor Santer just said. Basically, whilst the issue of owner's consent may well be perceived as tacit support for the proposal in the wider community, Council will continue to retain full control over this land, even if the DA is approved. Owner's consent in no way infers approval of the development proposal. Owner's consent is provided to consider the proposal and determine whether reasonable public benefit will be leveraged from the site. Regardless of owner's consent for the DA or even approval of the DA, Council effectively has veto powers if negotiations do not proceed satisfactorily. I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Laporte, what was your question?
Can I just ask, because obviously I'm new, so I don't know, the DA approval process, is that who would be approving this DA if it goes forward?
It would be the Sydney North Planning Panel.
Okay, so does that mean that we don't then have any input on...
Yeah, we have input because we are the landowners, and we would also have input to submit we can either withdraw consent or we can make a submission. Just before I give Councillor Beregi her speaking opportunity and right of reply, I'm going to speak very briefly. I'm just going to commend to councillors Glenn Courier's submission, which was that council should not ignore this opportunity to explore via a DA. Mr Giannakis asked a series of questions. And one of the first questions was, why is Coles given the right to proceed without any guidelines or planning study in place? Well, that's not true, because there is a vision for Neutral Bay. It's an existing vision for Neutral Bay, and it's called the North Sydney Local Environmental Plan 2013. There are planning controls in place and the DCP, and those are the controls that apply to the Coles site and to the car park. Unlike others, Coles has chosen to use a development application, not a spot rezoning or a planning proposal, and to proceed like any landowner has the right to do under the existing planning controls. So they haven't been given any special rights. They're using the existing system. You also said, why are they able to dictate the future on the car park and not council? And again, that's not correct. What we're asked to do tonight is to sign a DA form, effectively, to allow them to submit an application. It doesn't allow Coles the right to do anything with council's land. And in fact, as Councillor Welsh and many others have said this evening, if council isn't happy with what's in that development application, it's a very big risk that Coles is taking, because we could withdraw that owner's consent. In terms of access and ensuring that access both during construction and after construction for the other landholders who neighbour council's land, well, that's always been a priority for council, and that detail we will have to see in the DA, in the development application, if and when it's lodged. And the construction arrangements, they again are matters that are dealt with when you deal with the detail of a development application. Councillor Lamb raised a very important question, which is, under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, one of the matters for consideration, mandatory consideration, are the social and economic impacts of the development. And so there has to be an assessment of what the social and economic impacts of this development application is on Neutral Bay, and particularly on those other small businesses. So the DA process will, in fact, tease out many of the things that people have raised their concerns about tonight. It is open to any landowner to at any time put in a development application under council's existing planning controls. And so I'm not going to say anything further. I think that Councillor Burke and Councillor Welsh have said it all. And so for those reasons, I'm, as Mr Courier said, not going to give up this opportunity to explore something that is a once-in-a-generation opportunity on this site. Councillor Berge.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you've just had my right of reply. So I'm happy to move the motion.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried. That takes us...
Show of hands against the Mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. Those against? Okay, the motion is still... Councillors Gibson, Mutton, Lapouris and Spencerley voted against the motion. Thank you. Then we now go to the next item on the agenda, which is item 10.15, the Planning Proposal 6 of 2020, 45 McLaren Street Post-Exhibition Report. There are four registered speakers. The first is Tess Petzold. If you would come forward, please. Sorry, that's all really messy.
Don't know about you lot, but I'm pretty tired.
Thank you. And so if you give your name, address and who you're speaking on behalf of.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Tess Petzold. I'm an owner and occupier at 45 McLaren Street, North Sydney. I don't know if you're all aware of the building, if any of you have ever taken a leisurely walk down McLaren Street. We are the quiet little unassuming building on the corner that is certainly showing its age and really in desperate need of a makeover or a replacement. At this stage, we have been going through this process for now 6 years. All our lives have been in limbo. We've had deaths, we've had illnesses, we've had relationship breakups, many of which can't be sorted until this situation is worked out for us. So basically, I'm just here as an owner and as the treasurer of the, secretary of the Strata Committee, just to implore you all to please accept this planning proposal and let us get on with our lives.
Questions of the Speaker? Councillor Gibson.
Can I start? I was going to move that we proceed with this. There are other speakers there, but is everyone happy with the recommendation? Do they? It's getting late, and
well, thank you, Councillor Gibson. I'm chairing.
Would you like
so
to see? Would you like to see councillors just move it now?
Well, I would love that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Because I'm tired. I don't know about all you guys.
No, we're all tired. And I'm hungry. Can't we just cut to the chase and move this?
Well, I'm going to consult with those who registered to speak before I.
Well, could we ask them if they'd be happy if
Councillor
I put a
Gibson,
motion?
could you turn off your microphone? Thank you. The following people have registered to speak: Ariane Brody, Shane Shockman, Michael Grassi. Do you wish to address the council? Okay, thank you. Well, we'll take it that Ms Petzold spoke on behalf of the building, and thank you for your participation.
Could I move a motion, Mayor?
No, Councillor Berge was first, and Councillor Berge, would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remove the recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Gibson. Is there any debate?
I'd just like to briefly...
Thank you. You speak to your motion.
Thank you.
Speak to your motion.
I'd just like to thank you all for contacting us all over the last week. As a councillor who's been on council for a while, I'm more than aware of the stress, the anxiety, the pressure, and the impact that this has had on you. I can't take it away, but I hope that in moving this motion and hoping that it's carried, it gives some relief to the pressure that you've all been under. And I'd really like to thank those of you who really did write quite personal emails about the impacts it had, because what we always have to remember is that we're dealing with people's lives and we're dealing with their homes and we're dealing with their biggest asset, which is their home. And please don't think that that's been lost on us. It's been a terrible situation all round, and we hope this offers you some closure in going forward. And thanks for coming up and staying so late.
Councillor Burke, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Looks like this will go through. So I'll put my words in that context. You know, we have what I would call an unfolding planning catastrophe in McLaren Street, particularly between Miller and Walker Street. We have a broader economic system that is what I would term a property Ponzi economy, based on property speculation, haves and have-nots. It is putting enormous stress on our community. Those who are rightly seeking gain from their property and those who can't get into the market. We have had significant community feedback, and I do really sincerely appreciate that. From both sides, some saying that there's a complete loss of privacy and solar access to people next door, that there's a removal of tree canopy of 8 mature trees. Those types of issues mean something to me. And we have a situation whereby we have a very big cumulative impact on the infrastructure in our community, whether it be the road there at McLaren Street, whether it be the sporting and recreational spaces in our community, whether it be the schools in the local area. The residents are in a difficult position. They are wedged in a sense and looking for clarity. You will get some clarity tonight. However, in light of inadequate local and LGA-wide infrastructure, I cannot support this motion.
Are there, Councillor Gibson?
Yes, look, I think this, as I said, I know what this means to, I've discussed this with residents over how many years now? 72. Yeah, just so many years. And I'm delighted that this is about to be put to the vote. I certainly support our residents here. There's also about to be an independent school open up or try to put in a DA on McLaren Street. It's getting busier and busier, and the only little block that has been wedged in between all this development is this small complex on the corner of McLaren and Walker, and it would be totally unfair to deny development of this building. So I'm sorry it's taken so long, and I'm sorry it's had such an impact on all your lives, really. So, but I will certainly, this has my full support.
Are there any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Spencerley.
Yeah, just quickly to appreciate all of the feedback. It really does make doing my job easier. I hope it does pass. It sounds like it will. Congratulations. And having looked into the time on this period, it's extraordinary that it's taken this long. And congratulations ahead of hopefully what is the approval.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say as well, it was, really hard. It was very heartfelt reading all those emails. You put so much into it, and I'm hoping it's going to go your way tonight. And finally, you get a bit of a resolution.
Thank you. With that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 10.16. The strategic... Sorry, Councillor Gibson, if he called you to order, we're still having a meeting. Strategic framework for the provision of open space and recreation facilities. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of very brief comments on this.
I'll move the motion.
It's moved by Councillor
Sorry.
Burke, seconded by Councillor Gibson. Councillor Burke, you have the floor.
Just a couple of quick comments on this, Mayor and councillors and everyone in attendance. We have, as I said a minute ago, a very stretched sporting and recreational infrastructure asset suite, And issues like Primrose Park are difficult ones where we're taking more and more of our green space. So I'm really looking forward to this coming through, and I will watch with interest and hope that we can look at ways to expand this infrastructure for our community. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That takes us to item 10.18, Don Banks Studio, selection of the writer in residence for 2023. Councillor Walsh.
I have a motion. Okay, so it's the same motion for 1 and 2. And then I have a number 3. And I've put that, yeah. Okay, so basically, there were 2 applicants and only 2. And both were excellent. It would be unfortunate to lose out on the skills of the unsuccessful applicant. So that is why I have put this motion. Thank
Second you.
Oh, sorry.
Is there any discussion? I've put the item. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That brings us to Councillor Mutton's motion, item 11.1. Councillor Mutton.
Now I put the motion.
Councillor Mutton puts the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lapouris, seconded. Is there any discussion?
Very shortly, the council properties were the subject of a valuation that was presented to council in 2020. I noticed in the pool, the option 5 in the paper submitted with respect to North Sydney Pool, a different valuation is given. Now, there's always apples to oranges, so I thought in putting this motion forward, I would make it clear that the valuation we need is an actual market valuation rather than a desktop valuation driven off past records. Thank you, Ben.
Councillor Berge.
Now I'm going to speak against this motion. We already have staff that are way under the pump and under-resourced, and we have this information already. All you need to do is ring up council staff and ask to see the file. We don't need another report. We don't need all of this information. It's already on hand. You just make a councillor request to come and look at it. This is just additional work at a time when council's resources are already stretched. The intent, when you say that your idea is to retire existing debt or reduce the quantum of the debt that we need to incur to complete projects such as the North Sydney Pool, that just flags to me asset sales. This information is fully available to any council who wishes to ask by councillor request, and the staff don't need any additional work.
In reply?
Thank you. Well, just wait. Are there any other speakers?
Yeah.
Councillor Gibson.
I will certainly be supporting this. Don't forget we have a new councillor here who has the right to be provided with all the information that he needs to make decisions. And this, if the information's all available, as Councillor Berge just said, just needs to be put into a report and given to us. We need to be exploring the options here that Councillor Mutton is putting forward, and that's what the staff are supposed to do. I urge you all to support this motion, particularly so Councillor Lapouris can be brought into the loop. None of us should be at home having to spend hours and hours trying to search for information where actually we're not paid enough. I'm sorry, what we get as councillors is so minimal that none of us have EAs that are out there getting the information for us. It should all just be presented in a report and then we can look at it, for heaven's sake.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Burke.
Yeah, Mayor, look, I'm happy to see a report like this. I would state, though, that I'm not in favour of privatisation of our assets as a general rule, but I don't see any issue in providing a simple report, hopefully that just outlines the points asked by Councillor Mutton.
Reply in due course.
Through you, Mayor, I'd just like to ask a question of the General Manager. Yes. Would this involve substantial staff resources to compile this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, council staff currently working through a review of the property portfolio with a view of, as per the North Sydney Olympic Pool report, with a view of determining if there are any opportunities for sale. So we will do it as part of that review, if council was to resolve that way.
Councillor Santa?
I just said I pretty well support it. I think it's useful to have this information and in that format. I just don't agree with the reasoning for having it. I think it's worthy in its own right, but I just don't want to see it. I agree with Councillor Burke that it's not just in view of the possibility of possible sale. I wouldn't be greatly in favour of privatisation, but I think in its own right it's worth having this.
Or asset sales. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, yes, Councillor Berry, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment that council receives a report in respect to properties owned by council as part of the General Manager's report in terms of the financing. I think it's General Manager, if you could just state what the report you're preparing is that this would form part of, so that we're not doubling up resources and that we just only need to prepare it once.
So that's an amendment?
Well, thank you, Councillor Gibson. We're waiting for a response from the General Manager.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the report would be a future report to council in relation to any opportunities for sale as in relation to the funding of the North Sydney Olympic Pool.
Councillor Mutton, would you take that on as an amendment? No? Okay, press your motion. That's okay. Thank you. Now you have your right of reply. Unless there's other speakers, you've got your right of reply.
No, I'd like to move my amendment, which is that we wait.
Okay. Your amendment?
That this information is provided as part of a report from the General Manager in relation to financing of the North Sydney Pool.
Is there a seconder for that? Excuse me. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Berry, you speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. We're doing the work anyway. There's no need to bring this forward. Staff resources are limited. If you want to see it beforehand, you can make a councillor request, but we are just generating more reports on information when council staff are already doing it anyway. So we get the information Councillor Mutton wants, but we don't have to use resources twice.
Are any speakers on the amendment? If there aren't, then thank you, Councillor Burke.
My question was asked informally there by someone. What sort of time frame does this happen in terms of the asset part of the report, and when could it be available? The General Manager, through you, Mayor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, staff are working towards providing a report in the first meeting in June.
Thank you. If there are any other speakers on the amendment, I'll give you the right of reply on the amendment if you wish to exercise it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank the General Manager, and I don't think we'd get a report any quicker than that anyway, so I'll move the amendment.
Put the amendment. All those in favour? That's carried. The amendment becomes the motion. I put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Before we move to close the meeting, I wish to raise a matter of urgency. The reason for this is that, as you would know, we all voted to set up a working group with Langcove and Willoughby councils that consisted of the mayors and nominated ward councillors to talk about the infrastructure contributions in that area. I can report that the other two councils have now come back and nominated their ward councillors to participate. And I had an inquiry from Councillor Burke as to that, because we hadn't nominated our ward councillor or councillors to participate. So I will put to you that is a matter. I ruled that to be a matter of urgency and put to you that it is a matter of urgency, and ask so that we can establish that meeting sooner rather than later. I'm going to put that the matter is a matter of urgency. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Beregi. I put that to you all. All those in favour? That's carried as a matter of urgency. And so now I would open it to councillors to nominate to participate in that working group with Willoughby and Lane Cove councils. It's St Leonard's ward councillors was the term of the resolution of council. So,
Mayor, I'd like to nominate, as per my comments when it was first raised in the meeting a couple of months ago, I'd definitely like to put my hand up to be considered to be part of that working party.
okay, then perhaps we have a motion that Councillor Burke be council's nominated ward councillor for participation. We didn't put numbers on it, so if other St Leonard's ward councillors wish to participate, it is open to you all. So Councillor Santa, would you like to be included?
Yes, I would.
Okay, are there any other ward councillors? There's 2 left. 3 left.
Mayor, I'll move to nominate both Councillor Baker and Councillor Santa as our representatives.
Burke and Santa.
Burke,
Yeah.
sorry.
Do the other 2 ward councillors wish to be? Well, you will be provided with updates. It's meetings with the other 2 councils. Yeah. Okay. We have a mover, and it was seconded by Councillor Santa. I put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you all for your patience and participation. The meeting is closed.
Recording stopped.